you get any clues on the floor about what time this might wrap?
Oh my God! I just want to go home. I've missed our entire trip to the beach. My family's going to be back before we on that. So, and again, I'm going to vote no. There's no drama. The votes are going to go. In fact, the only interesting votes are going to be on the margin, whether that's Collins or Johnson and those. But all the Democrats, we all know how that's going to go. And I don't think it's really helpful to put people here till when some ungodly hour. And again,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
It's terrible. It's terrible in this country what we do to U.S. senators. My name is David Griscom. I'm joined as always by my good friend Matt Leck. It is Left Reckoning 227. Why Zohran won, why the Democrats are blowing it, and also the big, beautiful bill passes. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing better than John Fetterman, I guess. I got to the beach. People might be able to tell. I got a little bit burned. It's not so bad. You should see my back, which is total lobster roll. This is quite. I'm sort of astounded still by how unfit that guy is for office. The sort of vehicular threat that he's been exposed as in previous exposés about his personal conduct, but just in terms of doing Senate business. Okay, if you want to crash into oncoming traffic in a freeway on your own time, that's one thing. You are in Washington, D.C., and the party that you are meant to oppose is currently passing a bill that is going to cut almost $1 trillion from Medicaid, which would cut tens of millions off their health insurance, 3 million people off SNAP benefits. Mm-hmm. And your concern is that the family got beach day without you?
Which is probably a bonus for them.
Exactly. They're probably had a much better day without your big ass rain cloud hovering over when they're trying to make sandcastles. I wouldn't even mention the $1/3 trillion for the border Gestapo stuff because I know that John Fetterman likes that. Unbelievable.
No, it really, at a moment like this, that you're even talking about your fucking vacation instead of how you're going to defend working class families from this outright assault from the Trump administration is truly disgusting. But this is, one of the themes of the show today. The Democrats have no plan for what they're doing. From all the way of this guy who's just phoning it in, Fetterman, to the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, talking about how I renamed the bill before it passed, right? That's the kind of shit that they're engaged in. We're going to talk about the Democrats and the kind of problems there. We're also going to talk about the bill that just passed through the Senate and how Mr. Hawley, Senator Hawley, might not be the working class hero he's been made out to be.
I call it the GOP emo populist caucus. They're not going to do anything, but they're going to be very emotional about how the working class is getting shafted by bills that they, in fact, vote for.
They're going to bear witness. I don't want to spoil too much, but it is kind of funny how the right wing is kind of going through an ultra woke phase, let's call it, on the right.
100%. The standpoint epistemology, I'm seeing people Russian refugees respond to Zohran Mamdani grocery things. We got all the standpoint epistemology. It's great.
Holly is bearing witness to all these terrible things that he has to do. It is kind of wild. But we'll get to all that in a little bit. We're also really thrilled to be joined tonight by the co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America. And it's really great to have figures like Ashik Siddique on the program to talk about the organization, what's been working. We get into a little bit of the strategy behind the Zohran campaign, but really go under the hood and see what it is about the Democratic Socialists of America that was able to deliver this historic victory. So it's a really great conversation. I love being able to have folks like this on this program, and hopefully we'll be able to do more of it. So we'll get into all that in a little bit. But Matt, we got to start with the opposition party and the Democrats. They got, and it's one of those things. It's July now. It's a little bit in the rearview mirror. But we need to remind folks, the Democrats lost this most recent election, 2024, not just by a little bit, but by historic margins, at levels and losing groups that they should never, ever lose, let alone be competitive, let the GOP be competitive with them over. This was a disaster and a kind of, I don't know, counter thesis to everything that the Democrats have been saying for both of our professional lives about what the future of politics in America are going to look like, right? What the winning strategy is going to look like. Every idea that they have had has been proven absolutely false. And again, instead of embracing maybe the alternate thesis, the Bernie Sanders economic populist democratic socialist thesis, they continue to wage war on it. And we're seeing some very, very frightening examples that they're not even going to move a little bit on these kind of things. So we have the story about Project 2029 here, which I can bring up for folks if they haven't seen it. Project 2029, if you're not familiar, the Republicans had their Project 2025. Which we've been seeing a lot of those plans being implemented now under Trump. Sound familiar? Democrats lay groundwork for a Project 2029. The plan to write a policy agenda for the next Democratic president is at the center of a raging debate within the party, whether its biggest problem is its ideas or difficulty in selling them. You won't be surprised to find that this isn't actually like an earnest attempt to bring in new voices, unheard voices, but is actually a kind of like a nice waltz through memory lane of some of the biggest villains in the Democratic Party.
I mean, astoundingly so. There's a few in particular, but let's see how the text introduces them.
Yeah, so let me get these ready for folks. Sorry. Yeah, we can get here. So the surprise victory of Zohran Mamdani, a Democratic Socialist in the New York mayoral primary, only added fuel to that debate. Did he succeed because of the audacity of his ideas, freeze the rent, free buses, and free childcare, or because of the clarity and simplicity of those phrases? Well, I'll just tell you right now, if I'm a Democratic Party consultant, and I want to make sure that our party does no kind of reflection about how we've engaged in politics over the past few decades, I'm going to say that it was the simplicity of those phrases, and we just need a little bit better branding.
It's beautiful. This is like literally as if, I don't know, like a new startup company found a way to make running shoes that just like blew away like Nike and Saucony and whoever. And you can imagine the boardrooms being like, oh shit. We got to figure out what we can do that's basically short of just like buying them, I guess, entirely to get that in here.
No, and this is going to be, again, so this is something we'll be talking about, which is with Ashik in just a little bit, and something that Matt and I have been talking privately about, and I just really want to hammer home to our audience and to everybody out there, y'all should spread this around as well, is that the Democratic Party and Democratic pundits are going to try to do one specific thing when it comes to Zohran, right? They are going to try to say that the reason he was successful is because he was good at TikTok, because he was good at social media, and because he was young, right? Because those are things that they can replicate without having to change their actual material politics, right? Or without having to change who their donors are, or most importantly, who they serve, right? And this is going to be the argument that we'll be seeing from a lot of people who get paid a lot of money to misinform folks. And you can see it right here. Was it Zohran's relentless focus on affordability? And would it have worked if he weren't as charismatic and savvy at social media as he proved to be? Now, again, the Zohran campaign was very, very successful. It was very, very charismatic, and he was great at doing these videos. You know what else they did, Matt? They knocked a fuck ton of doors, historic levels of doors, right? They had an on-the-ground army of people engaged in politics on the daily basic level, talking to their neighbors, talking to folks they meet on the street, talking to people at restaurants, putting up posters all across the city, right? That is the kind of thing that you don't get with money, that you don't get with just a social media campaign, but you only get when you actually have an organization that is organizing regular, everyday folks. And it's notable that none of these people who are talking about this, who get paid a lot of money to talk about politics for a living, mention that aspect of the Zohran campaign. But anyways, don't want to get too distracted on this. Let's talk about this Project 2029 here and talk about some of the people involved in it. So Linda Lake, a prominent Democratic pollster, says we didn't lack policies, but we lacked a functioning narrative to communicate those policies. So again, go ahead, Matt.
I mean, this is so insane to me. Sorry, I mean, I guess I don't know what to say. Like, they had policies. What are these policies? What Kamala Harris was doing, like targeted.
It's insane. No, and the I mean, for the most part, the policies that they had were things that most Americans didn't want. Right? There was a distinct distrust of Kamala Harris and the Biden campaign because people saw their lives get worse. And again, this is one of those moments where you see that these people learned absolutely nothing from their historic defeat. Right? They were trying to convince people that their lives were better than they were. And there's nobody who's going to tell me if I'm suffering, if I'm having to make difficult financial decisions, if I'm going to the grocery store and I'm trying to buy food for my family and I pick something up and I look at the price and I say, oh shit, I have to put that back. Right? That is something that is visceral, that is memorable, and is going to affect me and affect the way that I view the world. And if some fucking pollster or Democratic Party politicians are to say, well, you know what, you are actually confused about just how good you have it right now, well, I'm going to resent those people. I'm not going to be convinced to support them. And they didn't learn any of those lessons. So again, this is what she's saying right here. Democrats presented to voters with, quote, agencies and acronyms and statistics rather than a clear story about what we are going to fight for, right? And again, this is where they say we weren't doing anything wrong. It wasn't our political commitments for the past few decades of supporting neoliberalism, right? Supporting the defunding of the American working class. That's not the problem. We've just been getting a little sloppy at our sales pitch, and our elevator pitch, needs a little bit of work. That's absolute bullshit. That is what happens when you aren't actually looking and trying to take any lessons from your historic defeat.
Like, I'm looking at Harris's economic policies, housing affordable based on reducing regulations, assistance to builders, neighborhood homes tax credit. Like, this is
Nice. Yeah.
This is what they did. What do you mean you had policies? You didn't. You did exactly what you're saying you know now not to do, but acting like you didn't just do it. Okay.
Let's get into some of these figures here. Neera Tanden, who served in the White House in the Clinton and Obama administrations and now leads the Center for American Progress, said that for years, Democrats have failed to appreciate the role that Mr. Trump's policies have played in his success. We'll get a quote from her in a second. Matt, do you have anything to say about Neera? It is one of those things. Some of the folks might not have been around for the Bernie campaign as much as we were. Neera Tanden was like literally enemy number one. This is somebody who dedicated her political career to trying to tank the Bernie Sanders movement, trying to tank young progressives in the party, and tried to defend the old guard of the Democratic Party, which has now lost to Donald Trump twice. Right, with significant consequences for millions and millions of people in America, and hell, for millions and millions of people across the globe. Right, this is somebody whose advice you should not be seeking. Right, and this is somebody who should, if they are earnest about politics, not just chasing a check, should actually be investigating and wondering what it is that I've done so wrong that has led me down this dark path. Instead, we're going to get some excuses here. But yeah, do you have anything on Neera for folks? Yeah,
Neera is almost comical in her sort of. She used to run Center for American Progress, which the initials are CAP, and it's funny in an era. It's funny that that organization didn't really survive into an era where that means lying.
Yeah.
But she ran Think Progress into the ground. I think there was some anti-union shenanigans that were going on. But her main contributions were basically getting into fights with Matt Bruenig on Twitter and people like that. I'm sure she's probably replied to things I've said before.
Oh, yeah.
She was just basically her main job was to pathologize any support for Bernie Sanders as some sort of misogynistic volcano that needed to be suppressed.
These are the people who, yes, as Matt just said, were pushing the idea of, quote, the Bernie bro, right? That people who were saying, hey, we should have universal health care in this country are somehow racist for saying so. This is what she said. This is her analysis that's quoted in this piece. Liberals underestimate the power of Trump's ideas and that we need better ideas to take on both Trumpism and the GOP. We get wrapped up in his personality, but he puts forward an idea like no tax on tips, and that's an important signifier that he is championing working class people. Now, again, this is an absolutely insane quote, right, for multiple reasons. First, liberals underestimate the power of Trump's ideas, that we need to get better ideas to take on both Trumpism and the GOP, right? Is this your first day in fucking politics? Yeah, you need to have some fucking ideas and a policy. What are you talking about here? This is crazy to sit here and be like an influential figure in the Democratic Party, right? One of the oldest political parties on the planet, by the way, right? And be like, you know what? in politics, you need to have some ideas. Yeah, no shit. This is somebody who has waged a war against ideas. And as people know, Matt and I love, we love ideas very, very much over here. And there's somebody who has waged a war on anybody who's trying to bring fresh energy into the Democratic Party, somebody who might have some ideas that differ from, hey, let's just give corporations whatever they want. Hey, let's just try to run tail the right wing on whatever kind of cultural reaction politics that they're pushing. And then this idea here too, that people have gotten too wrapped up in his personality. That was the campaign of fucking Hillary Clinton. That was the campaign of Kamala Harris. It's insane to sit here and just act as if they just sort of woke up yesterday and are now going to teach the rest of us about politics.
Well, what happened is, and what this reflects in a distorted fashion, is that liberals decided that they were going to say Trump won based on sexism and racism exclusively. And then he won again. And he won even bigger amounts, and with other communities that might say want to be more sensitive to sexism and racism.
Yeah.
And so now they have to admit, like, oh, actually, we can't just rely on that, because they thought they were just going to get bounce back victories in this sort of thing and run over this. And they're wrong. And the no tax on tips thing, that's another, like, that's only persuasive when no real, like, frankly, social democratic vision is being sold of a government that redirects investment to people's lives that makes it useful. Okay, well, fine. Stop taking more fucking money.
I'm sorry. What's more popular than no tax on tips is fucking Medicare for all. It just like the city is like, well, we have no way that we could respond to this, genius move from Trump. It's like, no, this is like bottom of the barrel shit. And the only reason it seems kind of like immobilizing is because y'all have purposefully, by the way, and this is another thing to remember about the Democratic Party, they want to demobilize people. They do not want to mobilize base, because a mobilized base of people who are asking and fighting for a better future is a threat to them, because they, again, aren't interested in serving everyday working class people. They want to protect their donor base, and that is the super wealthy, the elite in this country, and growingly, instead of the working class, a kind of credentialed, high wage earning, urban, political coalition. That is who the Democratic Party has been wanting to court over the past few years. So they want to demobilize working class, right? They want the votes, but they don't want those people in the room. They got all these kind of ideas. Now, I want to talk about some of the other people, to not just pick on Nira, but I wanted to just note what this is. Matt, maybe you can take us through who some of these other figures are. But Ms. Tandon is part of a sizable advisory board for Project 2029, which, again, this is what their project is. The idea that they're going to sort of come up with a blueprint for what a Democratic Party White House will look like in the near future, a la Project 2025. It includes Jake Sullivan. Matt, who's that guy?
Jake Sullivan is the point man for Biden's Gaza policy. Yeah, national security advisor under former President Joseph R. Biden Jr. So perfect. Exactly. The guy who, just one time he was mentioned by Dropsite News here. Sweeping Israeli Channel 13 investigation exposed the Biden administration's complicity in Israel's 19th month war in Gaza. This is from April. 9 top Biden officials acknowledged avoiding real pressure on Israel, even as the death toll surpassed 30,000. That is, it is definitely surpassed 30,000. Look at how many people are missing. Israeli leaders openly bragged they dragged out the war, playing for time until Donald Trump's return. This is something that was obvious to anyone.
Mm-hmm. No,
former National Security Advisor, sorry, just to finish the Jake Sullivan thing. Former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Ambassador Tom Needs, and others defended their unwavering support for Israel, even as they admitted enabling a campaign One USA described as killing and destroying for the sake of killing and destroying.
No, a brutal butcher. So that's who they're bringing in to help them out figure out how to win an election, which, by the way, Gaza, despite everything that these freaks were saying, was not an issue. Ended up being a pretty damn important issue in the 2024 election.
A huge issue. Jake Sullivan, and I might say this fairly cavalierly about other figures, Jake Sullivan should actually face war crimes.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And these are the people who not only they're defending, they want to be the future of the Democratic Party, right? This is the freak show here, is that they are not just like saying, hey, you know, we've done nothing wrong in the past, saying, hey, all the things that we've fucked up and all the horrible shit that we've done over the past few years, we want to keep on doing it, right? So again, if there's any hope that this party was kind of reoriented itself in a more progressive direction after, again, having every argument that they had made about politics, every belief that they had about what was going to be successful for them politically, proven absolutely, abundantly incorrect. We're seeing that there has been no real attempt to learn. Other figures here, Anna.
Sorry,
Marie,
just one more on Sullivan because I think it's worth.
No, he's an important. He's such an odious character. We could do the whole show on him.
National Security Advisor, this is from November 10th, 2024. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan today blamed Hamas for the lack of ceasefire deal, saying, quote, whatever Hamas is saying publicly, what they're communicating to mediators is no, we will not do a ceasefire and a hostage deal at this point, drops reports. As reported over the last several months, Hamas's position has remained unchanged, as calling for the immediate implementation of the U.S. proposed durable ceasefire plan and rejecting any plans that only call for a brief pause in the killings. I mean, this guy is as evil as any folks. There's only a certain level of evil you get, and it's like you're going to hell, right? like that, colloquially speaking. He's definitely burning up. Like and you want him to be in Project 2029. I mean, just to back up for a little second, I remember thinking like the Democrats need to make their own. Well, clearly we can't encourage that. We cannot encourage them to do a Project 29 because, frankly, I mean, and you look at what Keir Starmer's doing, similar Doge type anti-state stuff. There's a little bit of an impulse here that is bipartisan in terms of like evil. But let's continue working through these names.
Yes, we have Anne Marie Slaughter, who is an Obama person and the CEO of New America, which is one of these kind of centrist groups. Justin Wolfers, who I think we'll come back to in a second. Let me just read the rest of this list, Matt. Felicia Wong, who's at the Roosevelt Institute, and Jim Kessler, a founder of the centrist group Third Way, which I don't think I need to do too much explaining about what that group is interested in promoting.
I mean, unbelievable. Jim, people know what Third Way is. It's the Bill Clinton thing of we need to partner with Nike to help the working class, basically.
But tell us about this Justin Wolfers guy, Matt.
So there's this clip that I have a big thread where I say, it starts off with something like, before you tell me the economy in America is good compared to the G7 or whatever, this is like 2021, you have to state your income and mortgage, because there was a lot of Democratic messaging saying, hey, the economy is good. Why aren't voters giving credit to Joe Biden for it? And I mean, it's worth, maybe I don't think I am. I think that there's some shitty messaging here, but here's Justin Wolfers. When we talk about Zohran and the things that people will admit he did, which is, he messaged the economy really well, and he understood that folks were feeling it in the pocketbook, and I don't know if Wolfers really was getting the message here. I think he's actually kind of obscuring it, but maybe you guys be the judge.
Things do feel expensive at the grocery store. There is data. Egg prices, which were super high just a few months ago, have been cut in half. Why is it that the economy doesn't feel better for more Americans? Because these are really positive moves.
Yeah, in fact, egg prices are down 80% since the start of the year. When
but they were ridiculously expensive at the beginning of the year. Just give me that.
This is, just to clarify, this is July 2023.
They're just back to normal, and I like normal. Normal's fantastic. Look, when you ask people about the state of the economy, they think you're asking about what you think about their partisan preferences. It's like asking me, a University of Michigan professor, what I think of Ohio State. They could be playing well, but I'm never going to say it out loud. Now, instead, if you ask people, how's your life doing? What's going on? Do you think it's easy to find work? Do you expect to get wage rises? Are you worried about losing your job? All of a sudden, there is this incredible optimism. People understand the reality as it applies to their own lives. But if you ask them about the economy, they start looking at it through these partisan lenses, and they tell themselves stories that are completely at odds with their reality. And the reality is we've got unemployment at a 50-year low, inflation declining back to normal levels. And I want to add one more that we haven't talked enough about. inequality is on the way down as well.
Well, I want to devote an entire show to that. So we don't have more time right now. But if you want to talk about inequality improving, we always want to make more time for that. Justin, always great to see you.
No, I mean, this is big winner stuff. I mean, and by the way, as we had, with Stephen Semler, right the day after the election, he was able to show quite convincingly the fact that despite all this kind of nonsense we were getting from folks, no, people actually had material quality of life degradation that happened under the Biden administration. Right. And it was something that was visceral. It was felt. It was understood. People weren't confused about it. They weren't being partisan about it. Right. So, whatever. Some people in the margins would be partisan about it. But no, you can look at people who experienced some relief, by the way, particularly when it came to young parents in this country who felt that snatched away from them. And then you run a political campaign that was basically trying to run away. Basically nothing will fundamentally change. Redo. Under Kamala Harris, I don't know. It's malpractice to bring these people back into positions of influence.
And he's the economics guy, and your whole thing is like you need to take it seriously what people are saying. His entire message there, correct me if I'm wrong, is that people are getting confused by their politics about their situation. And
temperatures do high in politics,
look, like there was a little bit of wage growth in certain like quartiles or whatever, or quintiles or whatever the fuck for a brief moment. Not exclusively, not entirely because of the Biden administration, but also because of the Trump administration stuff. But that's not enough to allow you to afford rent any better. Like, just because you think you might get a raise doesn't mean you're satisfied with the economy generally. Like, the willingness that Democrat partisans had seems so suicidal to me that entire time, and it ended up shooting them in the face. And now they all get to act like they were vigilant about it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what ends up happening with Project 2029. I have a feeling that it's not going to go particularly well. And the fact is that anybody who's just sort of hoping that there might just be some kind of miraculous shift when it comes to Democrats in this country because of how bad their loss was in 2024, this is proof that it's not. In fact, there's a lot of Democrats who seem like they just want to have a redo, let's say. And on that point, let's get to my home state here of Texas, where we have the first announcement. Actually, second, an astronaut has said that he's going to run as well. But the first major announcement, let's say, of who's going to be running in the Democratic Senate primary here in Texas. And it's none other than Colin Allred, who delivered a humiliating loss against Ted Cruz. Let's see his campaign launch ad from earlier today.
I'm Colin Allred. I've been a lot of things in life, but I've always been a fighter. After playing football at Baylor, I decided to give the NFL a shot, hoping that I could help buy my mom the house that she'd been renting for 20 years. But I went undrafted. I got a chance to go to training camp, where
And I'm just going to add real quick, for people who didn't follow the race, or even people who lived through it, it was very forgettable. A lot of these stills and images that he's using in this commercial are like literal just grabs from commercials and ads he was putting out during the most recent Senate race. So, if you're getting a little deja vu, there's a reason for that.
played well, but I still got cut. In a lot of ways, though, I was undrafted in life too. Raised by a single mom on a teacher's salary, I never had the option to give up. So I came back to Dallas and took a job at the YMCA. I picked up towels, I swept the floors, and when my shift was done, I stayed late to put in the work in the weight room. And when I got another chance, I didn't just do our team workouts, I did my own workouts at night too. I made the team. And yeah, I bought my mom that house. The truth is, you shouldn't have to have a son in the NFL to own a home.
Okay, we'll get to the second part here, but again, one thing that's frustrating about Allred too is he's found a way to make the football thing uncool, which should be something that should be an absolute slam dunk. In Texas politics, probably anywhere. But again, this is unreflective already. This ad, not to get too much into the weeds of like doing ad analysis, but it is kind of crazy to lose the way that he just did face what we're facing in this state, in this country, and basically do almost verbatim the same pitch that you had the first time, as if you didn't just run and lose by a whopping margin to Ted Cruz.
He's leaning into it way too much, man. Like the football thing should be sort of like a understated trivia point of it. And his story, look, and I was like on his football stats. I gotta say, it's too complicated. I'm a hater. Lots of guys went undrafted. Lots of guys like played a few seasons. Like
I totally agree, because here's the thing is, and this is not to give Allred some free advice here, but the Allred story, like there's a part of it that is inspiring, right? He does all this stuff. He's successful in football, maybe it opens up some new opportunities for him and his family. He gets in the NFL and he gets injured immediately, right? But he goes back to school and he gets like a law degree and he becomes like like an effective, member of society as well. It's like, there is like something that's a good story there, but it's crazy how bad he is at telling it. In fact, like Allred has a tremendous biography. This is why they continue to run him, and this is why he raises so much money, which, by the way, that's what they're interested in. He's somebody who like really like dissects the grim reality in this state. He is he has relatives who were slaves, and he is also related to a former governor of Texas a long time ago, Governor Allred, right? Like he is somebody who sort of like, is in between those two harsh realities of the state. Anyway, this is somebody who has like a biography and a story that you could tell, but because he doesn't have any political commitments other than raising money for the Democratic Party, it comes across flat. I don't know if we'll watch this whole thing. Let's give him a second, because after the fucking minute of him talking about how great of a football player he was, which, whatever, he does try to pivot to this stuff.
Everything's backwards. Folks who play by the rules and keep the faith just can't seem to get ahead. But the folks who cut corners and cut deals, well, they're doing just fine. Texans are working harder than ever, not getting as much time with their kids, missing those special moments, all to be able to afford less. And the people that we elected to help, politicians like John Cornyn and Ken Paxton, are too corrupt to care about us and too weak to fight for us. I know Washington's broken. The system is rigged, but it doesn't have to be this way. In 6 years in Congress, I never took a dime of corporate PAC money, never traded a single stock, never had a hint of scandal. Because at heart, I'm still that undrafted kid, fighting for what's right. I'm still that guy showering after work instead of before it.
Yeah, okay.
That is literally stolen from Scott Walker in Wisconsin.
That's great.
The shower after work, but not before work. That's so funny.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and it's also like, any reflection, friend, about how badly you lost in this most recent election. A lot of people tried to work and help out your campaign, which you refused. I mean, can we get into some of this Allred stuff? I mean, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on? I mean, look. Colin Allred,
I mean, my only thought off the top of my head is that if Pepsi gets second place to Coke, it doesn't decide it needs to change the whole formula to Pepsi up. So if you're still selling Pepsis, at least to who you want to sell them to, then keep selling them.
Let's just, I won't belabor this because we're going to be covering it. We'll see if there's a competitive primary. People are talking about James Tallarico running, Castro potentially running, Beto O'Rourke's talking about maybe running, and I'm sure maybe a couple other people throw their hat in the ring. There's other statewide races in Texas as well, so we'll see if people line up. Allred is definitely jumping in early and quickly, I think, to try to get that field to clear out for him, because, again, Beto, Castro, and Tallarico just had a huge rally in San Antonio. Beto has been going along with Greg Casar and Bernie Sanders to those big and the oligarchy tour things. So anyways, there's a lot of stuff here, but I want to talk about Allred for a second, just to remind people of what happened, because even though 6 months ago, I think some folks have kind of forgotten just how bad that election was. Not only did they lose to the Republicans here, not only did Allred lose to the Republicans, they lost the key demographic groups. Ted Cruz and the Republicans were able to make significant gains in the key demographic groups that have been key to the Democratic Party pitch for Texas. The Democratic Party pitch in Texas has been, since they lost, that demographic changes are going to deliver them victory in this state, right? I have a lot of problems with that thesis, and as you've seen, it has not panned out. But the fact of the matter is, like, that has been their pitch for a long time, is that Hispanic voters in particular are going to sort of deliver them to victory now that Texas is a non-Anglo majority state, right? Now that the Hispanic population is larger than the Anglo population. They are losing that community to Trump and to people like Ted Cruz, right? So they are going backwards. Colin Allred did not move the ball forward, to use a football metaphor. He went backwards. He got sacked. Frankly, he fumbled the fucking ball, right? And they're sitting here acting like, well, it's time to get up and fight again. No. What Colin Allred should do is step back and allow somebody else who actually can convey a legitimate message to Texan voters about not just your life, right, and your biography, but about what it is that the Democratic Party is offering to do to better your life. You know, people act again like this is the first political campaign in history. Democratic Party campaign ads are always the same. They're saying, you know, things are tough in America. They should be better, right? That's not revolutionary, groundbreaking to talk like that, right? When we talk about like economic populism, when we talk about these kind of things, we're talking about doing things like Zohran's freeze the rent, right? Raise the minimum wage, not I think that people should make more money than they do right now, right? That's vague bullshit. Everybody says that, right? It comes off as false. Now, Colin Allred's campaign, again, not only did it lose, they lost those groups that they're supposed to be winning, the groups that they're supposed to be gaining with. There is one metric that Colin Allred did very well in, raising money. Colin Allred versus Ted Cruz, who, by the way, is an incumbent with like the most negatives you could probably have. Ted Cruz is a hated guy. The fucking Republicans hate Ted Cruz, right? This is somebody who, if you are going to beat somebody as a Democrat in Texas, that's the guy you want to go up against because he is a lightning rod for anger and frivolous nonsense.
A Cuomo-style liability, basically.
100%. But this contest between Ted Cruz and Allred is the most expensive U.S. Senate race in the nation. Colin Allred broke almost every record when it came to raising money, right? And don't forget this, and this is something important to remember. That money gets spent. This doesn't just go up into the air. That goes to ad folks, that goes to consultants, that goes to a lot of people. And, you know, there are a lot of people who are particularly interested you know, in this economy. So let's look at a few of them. So this is before his announcement. This was the day before Monique Alcala, who was the executive director of the Texas Democrats at the time, said this is during the Allred race. Colin doesn't and probably will never get any credit for all of the work he and his team did behind the scenes. Texas is lucky to have a credible candidates like him who can raise serious money. You love that. First thing, raise serious money, will engage down ballot, and who recognize we can do better. And I noted what I already noted to y'all before.
Sorry, how did the things besides raise money? How did those actually pan out? Was he good for down ballot raises?
No. They had a horrific, all across the board in Texas. This election was a disaster. You know, people were saying, oh, because he did slightly better than Kamala Harris. You know, that's why he's exciting. Sorry, if we're using that as a metric, and I'm not a Beto O'Rourke guy, but if we're doing this kind of shit as a metric, Beto O'Rourke is like the only candidate you should run because he's the only one who's come close in my lifetime to unseating a Democrat. Not a guy who raised more money than anybody ever and still lost by like 8 points. Now, I just want to put up this map, and then let's go back in time a little bit, and then we'll get on to the rest of the show. This is what the map looked like on election night, and you see again the bleeding across the state in regions that again used to be called the quote blue wall. Allred did horrific. Ted Cruz, again, one of the most hated candidates, won, and that is what that map will look like again if he's able to get this primary. Let's look at some of the folks and how they were reacting to the Colin Allred campaign when it got criticized. Because people were very critical of the Colin Allred campaign. This isn't just some of us after the fact saying, oh, you know, he lost and we're against it. People were really upset with Colin Allred because Colin Allred ran a sleepy campaign. He raised more money than anybody, right? And he spent it doing something. He wasn't spending it doing campaigns. They didn't have big rallies. They didn't have, you know, a real serious like ground operation. Colin Allred only visited 34 counties in Texas. Texas has 254 counties, right? So there was no real investment. And then people who said, I'm so worried about Trump. I'm so worried about Ted Cruz. I'm going to Join up with the Democratic Party and say, hey, please let me knock on doors. Hey, please let me get out t-shirts. Hey, please let me get out lawn signs to people so that we can defeat the right. The thing that you guys say that we're supposed to be doing, the thing that you guys are asking for money for us to be doing. You know what happened? All across the state, people were just put on a wait list. And they waited and they said, hey, we're here. Maybe you guys could come do an event, or maybe we could hold a rally, or maybe we could do kind of get the vote out the campaign here. Call to headquarters, nothing. Call again to somebody involved with the campaign, no response. Nothing. All across the state. In those parts of the state, by the way, that you see went red. Right? So all these people are saying, hey, we need to do something. I'm really inspired by your message. And Colin Allred and his folks didn't have the time of day for him. Right? It is absolutely despicable, and it is political malpractice to sit here and say the Colin Allred campaign was a success. Now, people were very upset about what was going on, and this was, I think, a very telling moment in the way that the Texas Democratic Party operates. So again, not to pick on Monique, but this is Monique. During the election, there was a piece in the Texas Tribune, which, if you don't know Texas politics, is not like some fucking far-right political organization. It's like a kind of serious news operation. And they interviewed folks and they said, hey, people are kind of worried about Colin Allred because they don't see him anywhere. He's not doing big rallies. They're not seeing the yard signs. They're not seeing the ground game operation. What's going on? They interviewed some people, and some people said, yeah, this seems like a problem. And then they interviewed some folks who said, oh, this is why it's so like a sneaky, brilliant strategy, right? Fair and balanced kind of thing. Again, this is a journalist, Jasper, a politics editor at the Texas Tribune, who tweeted out this story in August. And this is Monique's response. Hey, I'm the executive director for the Texas Democrats. Let me set the record straight. No one has invested more in our party than Colin Allred. He has done the hard work to win. He's crisscrossed their state. Now, again, I just told you all the facts. Colin Allred went to 34 counties out of a state of 254 counties. It is a bald-faced lie to sit here saying he's crisscrossed the state. Absolutely not. He's meeting Texas where they are. No, he's not. Texas is a big state that presents big challenges. We welcome productive discussions on those. But if you are lying and spreading misinformation about our work to beat Ted Cruz, please sit down. Now, again.
Oh, yeah, take a seat, buddy. That's so funny because invested is the one, I believe. Yeah. Invested in that. But the crisscross ones, like what they fly from like Lubbock to Houston and
El Paso,
then Texarkana. Yeah.
I mean, it's a joke. And then again, as if the job of the Texas Tribune, right, the job of journalists is to be fucking, washing your laundry for you. Absolute bullshit. Another person who's pretty upset about this was Olivia, who said, Olivia Giuliana, everybody loves and knows, brilliant mind, the future of the Democratic Party. Anyone saying Colin Allred hasn't intentionally engaged the base or traveled the state is spreading misinformation and frankly helping Ted Cruz's campaign divide the Democratic Party. Again,
sorry. This
humiliating defeat is coming in a couple months. I just want to remind folks of this. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
This is like when you see people involved in like multi-level marketing or pyramid schemes, and then people are like telling the people beneath them like, hey, can you not get involved with this because it's a scam? You're like, no, it's not a scam. We're actually selling a lot of products, a lot of Tupperware. That's what's going on right now.
And I'll just read this last quote for people listening. Allred has done both base mobilization and persuasion. That's what it takes to win. Now, again, Ted Cruz handedly defeated Colin Allred by it wasn't even close, unlike Beto O'Rourke, who came within striking distance of unseating this person. So the Democratic Party going backwards. And in a lot of ways, Colin Allred running is kind of like a very brutal metaphor for the Democratic Party. It is older folks, people who have already been established, not fucking stepping down and finishing up. But the difference is, unlike Nancy Pelosi, who at least has like been in a position of power for a long time, the Democratic Party just running the same guy in every fucking election and losing, really, really ugly stuff, very disheartening. And this party has no conception of what it needs to do to win. Now, there is a model, there is an alternative out there. And that is what we saw with Zohran's campaign in New York City. We're about to be joined by Ashik Siddique, the co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America, to talk about what worked. And you won't want to miss it. Welcome back, Left Reckoners. David here, joined as always by my good friend Matt Leck. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, David. Good to be with you.
Yeah, man, I'm doing pretty good too. I mean, we got some rough news to talk about elsewhere, but still celebrating this huge victory in New York. And as people may know, the second round of votes have come out in Zohran Mamdani's election, and he just smoked Cuomo. He smoked Cuomo so much that he would have won, even if it was just with people who voted, put him number one on the ballot. So just an overwhelming victory. And to talk about that, how it happened, how we could maybe find ways to make it happen elsewhere, I'm really, really thrilled to be joined by return guests on the program, Ashik Siddique, who is national co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America. My friend, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks so much for having me, and it's great to talk about some good news for a change.
Yeah, no, we were just saying before we went on, last time we had you on was right after the Kamala Harris defeat. But, one of the things that Matt and I really liked about Zohran's campaign, even in those early days, was one of those videos he put out in his campaign where he went to some of those areas of New York City that flipped or that moved towards Trump significantly. And he went out and he talked to everyday folks, which, I don't know, just showed a different way of doing politics than the way that most Democrats typically engage in politics. And I wanted to ask you, there's been plenty of attacks from Democrats against Zohran, and I wanted to just sort of get your perspective on what this victory means for maybe the Democratic Party, but also for the Democratic Socialists of America.
Yeah, this just shows such a huge vindication of the theory of change that we've been laying out for years since Bernie Sanders ran for president. So many people were inspired to join an organization like DSA, or just to really seek out an alternative to this political system. And Zohran's win, now being in line to become mayor of the largest, most wealthy city in the world, shows the proof of concept. Like, Zohran was one of many people who joined DSA in those first years of the Trump administration. He helped organize on one of DSA's first campaigns that was run in New York City in 2017. And DSA has really made a lot of choices in New York City over the years to make this possible. So just running a campaign so relentlessly focused on cost of living, on universal policies that would meet universal needs, free childcare, free buses, rent freeze, municipal grocery stores to control the cost of food. That's the reason he won. There's some pundits, like people in the Democratic Party consultant sphere, who are responding to things like, oh, well, he used social media, so we should do more video content. We should have young candidates. And obviously those are important factors in Zohran's win, but those were all things that are additive on top of just a very strong core message and platform. Which really comes out of, again, just years of analysis about why the Democratic Party has been losing core parts of his base. So many, millions of people have just been falling out of the bottom of what had been a reliable base for the Democratic Party for many years. And it's because the party has just moved more and more toward the center, toward this imagined idea of a moderate center, more affluent people, and just really ignoring working class people across all identity factors. And that's what Zohran identified so well in that video you mentioned right after the election last year. He went out to, Jackson Heights, or parts of the Bronx, immigrant working class communities, racialized people who had been really taken for granted as part of the Democratic Party's voting base, and talking to them, just having conversations, basic parts of organizing that, again, the ruling class has been ignoring for many years. He connected with them and just asked, did you vote this year? Who'd you vote for? Many of them didn't vote at all. Some did vote for Trump. And it's for all the reasons that were just, very illegible to people who are not just insulated in these focus group consultant bubbles. It was because the cost of living had been going up. It had been ignored. All the spending on war, on Gaza, on Ukraine, all these things that were just showing how out of touch the establishment is. And then Zohran laid out, oh, well, what if somebody was running on fast and free buses, on free childcare, on controlling your housing costs? Oh, would you support somebody like that? And everybody's like, hell yeah, I do that. And he's like, well, I'm running for mayor. Would you support me? And this was at a time when he was really not being taken seriously. A lot of people were not really paying attention to the mayoral race as a competitive thing. But just all that groundwork that his campaign laid, that New York City DSA really helped build the ground game for, that really paid off. Just week after week, month by month, more and more people started to take him seriously and realize that this is a serious effort to change how the wealthiest city in the country functions.
Yeah, well, I mean, on the sorry, man, just before we like get into like the kind of like, I don't know, like the politics of it, I was wondering if you could sort of break down like the DSA difference here, right? Because Zohran's more than just like the things that he argues for. It's like the entire organization behind him. So like, what separates Zohran from, a progressive who we might share a lot of values with?
Yeah, so I think we really want to emphasize in this period, like not just to toot our own horns, but like really we did build a whole political apparatus that is run by and for members of the Democratic Socialists of America, like ordinary people who had not mostly been part of the political system in any meaningful way. We have a lot of young members, a lot of people who are new to organizing over the past decade and really figured out a lot of how to. Just how to campaign to meet people's needs based on a lot of different issue-based campaigns, running candidates for lower office like state senate, state assembly, city council. That's the basis from which Zohran was able to run. And New York City DSA really helped build that. So Zohran, like I mentioned, a campaign in 2017 that Zohran had worked on. So in 2017, this was a year of really rapid growth for DSA. So just for those who don't know, DSA is a member-run organization. We have 80,000 members now all over the country. And we don't take funding from foundations or large donors. It's really just based on members contributing dues at whatever level they can. So it's collective effort, collective resources, and collective democracy that shapes what we do. So in 2017, after Bernie Sanders had run for president, a lot of us were trying to figure out, how do we keep this going? How do we build a movement for democratic socialism that, like Bernie said at the time, it's not me, it's us. We need to organize in collective ways. It's not just about a great individual at the top who's going to do nice things for you, even if they win power. So in 2017, New York City DSA ran its first campaign. It was for a city council candidate named Kader El-Yatim, who was a Palestinian pastor based in Bay Ridge, which is a neighborhood that I was born and raised in. You can see the Verrazano Bridge in my background. This is like the closest part of Brooklyn to Staten Island. So historically a pretty conservative neighborhood. When I was growing up, it was pretty, solidly like white working class, like various kinds of like white ethnic. Like I'm pretty sure I was one of the few kids in my class who was not specifically Irish or Italian Catholic. But over the years, it's become more Arab, more specifically Palestinian. So the demographics have changed over time. And around 2016 and 17, like Bernie Sanders winning in the primary in districts like Bay Ridge was what opened up a lot of a sense of possibility for people realizing like, oh, people really would vote for an alternative. How can we carry that forward? So the campaign for Kader El-Yatim turned out to be kind of like the training wheels for New York City DSA. That campaign didn't win, but he got a solid third of the vote. A lot of community organizing was built through that effort. And that really became the basis for a lot of organizers to, really see what it was like for an organization to build a real base of community support for somebody who really represented a political alternative, who campaigned on, more of these like expanding public services, meeting basic needs, like in the mold of a Bernie. And a lot of people who organized it on that campaign went on to, raise ambitions, run more candidates for local office in New York, and really starting to demonstrate the capacity to win. A year after that is when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won her congressional race. Julia Salazar won for state senate, and that was a much more like DSA-driven campaign. And that just really laid the foundation. And one of the volunteers on Kader El-Yatim's campaign was Zohran Mamdani. So Zohran, that to me is like a core example of the DSA difference. Like we are building the political capacity for just normal people to learn what it's like to do political campaigns, to connect with people in communities, and to really be an independent organization. So when Zohran announced his campaign for mayor, or was even starting to mull it, there were a lot of people in, progressive organizations like labor unions, like the types of orgs that do local electoral campaigns, were very skeptical and, didn't think there was a lane for somebody this solidly to the left. There was a sense of caution, of course, we'll just have to get behind the most progressive, viable alternative. So, sure, if you want to run to advance your message, good luck. But fall in line was the implication. But because New York City DSA had really, spent year after year demonstrating a base, like building this block of people in state government and city council, like that gave us the confidence to think like, all right, we'll see how far we can go, but we think we can give it a serious shot. And just having built up that field game, and again, just the field operations, all these things, like Zohran's campaign was heavily staffed by DSA members who had these years of experience in building independent campaigns and winning. Or, even when we don't win, we experiment and learn, new techniques, new ways of reaching people. So all this is built over time to the point where we have.
I mean, these are campaigns that are building into one another, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of the things that, like, I think that people who haven't been engaged in political campaigns might not realize is that, like, everything from like staffers to strategists to like pollsters, all these kind of things, are typically, you kind of shop out, like you kind of buy out on the market. We don't have like the kind of party structure, even like the Democratic Party doesn't operate in the same way that like maybe a Labor Party would in another country. The real advantage with DSA is that, like, even when, there's like a loss, there's a whole group of people who are working on this campaign, see what works, see what doesn't. And that goes, into election after election, which is why New York City DSA is in such a strong position now. And I won't put words in your mouth. I'll say this, this is one of those things too, for the rest of us who aren't living in New York, right, to sort of think about how to start building up those capacities within our own, local DSAs, because, it's great to have a candidate like Zohran, obviously. But the real difference with him was this kind of ground game. And it's something that, like, people really need to be focused on, instead of focusing so much on like, oh, if we do this right kind of messaging, or if we do this right kind of like media strategy, we're going to win. Zohran's great, but I don't think he's able to break all this down if he doesn't have, for example, like the door knocking operation, which is just historic by any metric, not just DSA, like by like any kind of political campaign metric.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, Zohran is very talented. I think he's a generational talent. People who saw his victory speech, immediately their comparisons to, to like he references FDR, and like I heard so many people being like, "Oh wow, he should run for president. Too bad he wasn't for the country."
Yeah.
So he's very talented, but yeah, like you said, so much of his power and what propelled him to this win is being part of and accountable to a democratic organization. DSA is a kind of civil society organization or working class organization that really hasn't existed in the United States in many decades. The New Deal a century ago was won because there was so much civil society organizing. You had the Socialist Party, you had militant labor unions, you had all sorts of, the kinds of civil society, Kiwanis, I don't even know, like organizations that really don't exist at the same level anymore, or need to be rebuilt. So labor unions in particular really were the backbone of really any major movement victory for the past century. The welfare state across Western society, organized labor was the muscle of all these things. So that's another part of Zohran's strength. Like New York City DSA was a core part of it, but through the relationships that DSA members in particular did build with a bunch of unions like United Auto Workers, UAW came out early, Region 9A for Zohran. There were community groups and like groups of organized workers, especially like taxi drivers, who, years of relationships led to them being at the core of the coalition that helped elect him. So DSA helped make that possible. It's really not possible to separate the victory of Zohran from DSA. Like, this is a meaningfully different, and for many Americans, it's a new way of thinking about politics. Just the idea that we can do more than choose from options on a ballot. Like, it really can be participatory and led by and for people. And just like a core part of what's been part of his campaign all along, like the messaging and like the way that the campaign is organized, is an understanding of class, like the understanding of politics as class conflict. Like, you can't just appease everybody. You can't just say the right things to appeal to some nebulous spectrum of people. Politics is conflict between classes, and to win for your class, you need to represent working class people. You need working class democracy. So that's the kind of organization DSA is. Zohran comes out of that, and that, like, now there are huge questions about how do you govern a city like New York City?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
No, I mean, we'll jump into that in a second, because I actually think that the municipal question is important. Matt, I know you had something that you wanted to get to before we get to these clips, though.
Yeah, just a couple more on the linkages sort of driven. I want to get to sort of progressives in general because the Lander thing was kind of very interesting to me. But I also see Zohran posters in all sorts of businesses, and I saw other folks commenting on that. Can you talk about that outreach a little bit and how that went?
You mean to businesses in general?
Yeah, like
so. When I was there, I was in New York the week before the election, and I went to my favorite Chinese restaurant, Spicy Village, and I was sitting down, enjoying my noodles, and I saw, a nice little poster of Zohran looking right back at me as I was enjoying my food.
Yeah, I've just been being in Bay Ridge for the past week, or different neighborhoods, like especially neighborhoods with high concentrations of immigrants, and particularly Muslim immigrants. I mean, just the way that he has tapped into a whole layer of people who've been left out of the political system or never, treated as more than just as token votes. Like, there's been really deep engagement building for months that get to the point where, every bodega or cafe in this neighborhood has a Zohran poster right now. And if they don't, I have questions. But yeah, just like walking into restaurants or, bars, or just like seeing the Zohran poster, it's just like, I haven't seen this kind of, like you hear stories of, or in movies from like the New Deal era, you see like, a little middle-class family with an FDR portrait or, like Jewish immigrants or something, just like new immigrants at the time. Like, that's what this is. I feel like it's just, and just thinking about my own, like my own family network, like coming from Bangladesh, I have a huge extended family that mostly lives in New York City. There's never been this kind of activation. Like in the past, my parents have been loyal Democrats for most of my life, but I don't think they've paid attention to primaries at this scale. Just hearing about like all these like Facebook groups or like WhatsApp chats, like there's like a deep level of activation where they've been sharing all these videos, including like in Bangla, for example. So the multilingual outreach is something that's been really, really significant for this campaign. I have never seen a campaign in the United States be this multilingual and, just really like Zohran himself filming videos in Bangla, in Hindi or Urdu, and Spanish. And these videos are getting hundreds of thousands of likes and follows. Like, they're being shared in the native countries of those languages, who share them back with people in the diaspora in New York City, being like, who is this guy? Are you voting for him? How can we get him elected? This is like an international campaign, which really reflects New York City being this international city, like a working class internationalism in a way that I have never seen before. So I think just, really respecting people enough to communicate in their languages and just like make the effort. And a lot of the videos too are kind of just like jokey about it. Like there's a Bangla language video where he's, for 2 minutes is speaking in Bangla in a restaurant with Shahana Hanif, who's a Bangladeshi American city council member who also had a tough race and won. And, he asks, like, how am I doing? How's my Bangla? And she's like, it's not bad. It's like, it's not great, but like he's making an effort. And similarly in Spanish, he filmed a Spanish video, and within a few days, the New York Post, like right-wing rag, put out accusations that it was AI generated. Like, oh, he's faking it just to pander with people. So then his response to that was so brilliant. He just put out a video of the outtakes of that, like him just talking the Spanish. And you're like, no, I'm a real human, like trying. So yeah, it's that kind of thing. Like, again, on top of the policies, the platforms, like all of that being front and center, but he is making these very authentic, genuine efforts to connect with people on their own turf. Like he went to like mosques all over the city for months. He went to, small business, like reaching out to the bodega owners. Like his branding itself is like, kind of reflecting this New York storefront aesthetic. So, in thinking about the class composition of his base, there is an element of, the small business owners, like storefronts, bodegas.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things he ran on too, is like, cutting the regulations on those kind of businesses as well.
Yeah, which is, it's, a lot can be said, like among people on the left about the class composition, about, do we like small businesses or whatever? And these are useful conversations, I think, but his campaign has been so relentlessly focused on the billionaires, the oligarchs, the people at the top. And all of you, like across, whatever kind of more distinct class distinctions we could make, most people are being screwed by the system right now. Cost of living is going up across the board. Thinking about bodega owners, like people who own grocery stores, they see, the way that costs are going up, and that cuts into their bottom line too. Like them being the ones who provide these basic needs for people. Like they see people's unhappiness with that's weird. So yeah, I think just like really pointing directly at the people who are causing these problems and being very inclusive about, giving people opportunities to come along, represents, a really interesting potential for realignment, like political realignment in a way that, that you see in other countries, like in Latin America, in Mexico right now, like Claudia Sheinbaum's government. She's the most popular president in the world right now. And it's because Morena, like her party, have made very conscious choices about the class spectrum they represent and who is standing in the way of achieving, more expensive needs for people.
But on that, like, actually, I'll just know this, and we can have some videos I would like to play. But like, kind of like Claudia, how Claudia was a very historic candidate for many reasons, too. But she didn't make her focus, her identity was not like the focus of the campaign. Zohran too, very unique backstory, and he's a first in many ways. But instead of making it about himself, I found one thing was really compelling was like he sort of was kind of like a mirror or maybe a megaphone for like all of these different groups in New York City, which I find to be very, very powerful. Instead of kind of like, I don't know, individualizing everything, it's a collective thing, which our politics should be about. And I just think that can't be understated when it comes to, I think, a lot of his success, because you could see that's part of like the logic and the rhetoric of American politics. A lot of the interviews he gets there were trying to get him to go into that kind of stuff, like they did with Claudia as well. And he was just very adept at kind of very much kind of like Bernie Sanders too, being like, oh, yeah, this is great, but we got to do something about how expensive New York City is, and it's a wonderful place, all that.
Yeah. The message discipline has just been really fantastic. He's just so good at reframing and just bringing it back to what the core issues are. The clip that you referenced where he's explaining capitalism versus socialism on CNN, it's just like this is reaching millions of people now. Like,
so let's get this here. We have this King clip of him on CNN that I think is just really great because and I would want to hear a reaction on this, and I'll just sort of maybe frame it in this way. There's always this kind of conversation in our politics about how we should address like the socialism question, right? Oh, should we be like kind of secret socialists? Like in our meetings, we all call ourselves socialists, but when we go out in public, we sort of disavow it or like hide about it. And I found this to be a really great response here from Zohran. So I'll play this for everyone.
Do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. King decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's what I'm focused on, is dignity and taking on income inequality.
Oh, it sounds pretty good to me. I mean, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, just even like referencing somebody like MLK, like I feel like sometimes on the left, like within DSA or just online, like people really want to, it's almost like the narcissism of small differences emerges, where people just really want to find the right, person from over a century ago that represents your specific politics. And I think Zohran is really pointing to mass politics that has existed within the United States. Like we had extremely popular, now like revered people like Martin Luther King Jr., who did identify as a democratic socialist. And I think that's an important part of the tradition that that we need to recover, like to do mass politics in the 21st century, like from the left, that represents millions of working class people. I think they're very clear reference points that we can use. In his victory speech, Zohran used a specific FDR quote that I thought was really interesting. It might have been easy to just, talk about the New Deal as like a nice, like socialism is when the government does things, which, people on the left can have critiques of that. But the reference he made was Roosevelt identifying the reasons for fascism arising, just the desperation that arises when a political system stops addressing people's needs, their economic needs. People become desperate and they start casting about for anyone who might propose an alternative. And he was saying that in response to the rise of fascism in the 1930s. And Zohran was making that connection very explicitly, like presenting himself and his campaign, the movement he represents, against Trumpism. And that's a historical parallel that I think a lot of us have been feeling, especially since Trump got elected a second time with an even larger margin, now directly putting oligarchs like unelected billionaires like Elon Musk in charge of stripping the government for parts. What's happening now with the big, beautiful bill, like it's a really alarming acceleration. So to be able to have a clear, consistent message for right now, but also situate it historically, like make these comparisons to help people understand what he means by democratic socialism. That's really powerful. And I think that's the style of mass communication, like a mass politics that is really resonating. And this blowout win in New York City, now, just forcing people all over the country, including in political media that is clearly not friendly to him. Like he's making them acknowledge this. Like there needs to be a change. This campaign demonstrates that, and they can't just paper over it.
That's what's funny about the allergy they have to the content. When they say like, oh, he's doing all these social media videos. Well, the very first one was him going out and asking voters why you have such a big problem with the Democrats. That helps your charisma, It turns out. I think people say like, yo, yes, this guy's reflecting my actual problems with me. And when they actually have to talk to him about this stuff, they're not really ready for him to say, actually, it's in the lineage of MLK, and it's like, oh, I guess he might be right. Right? That's fascinating.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think being able to connect to that larger tradition is absolutely critical, and also being able to run as a Democrat but also kind of not be painted in that way is absolutely critical. I have some clips here, and I just want to make sure we're good on time, because I have some clips here because I want to get to some of the response both from the Democratic Party and from the Republicans. But just if for like 2 minutes, I would like to just bring this up to you and to hear your thoughts about it, how maybe the DSA is thinking about it. Running a city like New York is difficult, not only because it's a big city, a lot of moving parts, but it's also like it's not an imperial position, right? You're not the mayor who can do whatever they want. They're going to have to deal with the state government, the federal government, and all these different things. Municipal socialism, like there is a tradition of it, in the U.S. I will say, by the way, as a historian of socialism, that was a little bit of the conservative variant of the movement here. So not saying it was bad, but just saying people sometimes, really focus on this one moment and miss the rest of the history here. Anyway, there's going to be some challenges if he, wins the general election and goes into it. What kind of preparations are needed? What kind of strategy goes into this? I mean, how can we both, talk about changing the world, but also have our feet on the ground, and face the very, very real difficulties and challenges that are in front of us?
Yeah, that's a fundamental question going forward. I think there are a bunch of reference points that I think a lot of us in DSA have been thinking about. In relatively recent history of New York City, there's David Dinkins, who was mayor when I was born. I don't have conscious memories of it. Unfortunately, my earliest New York mayor memories were Rudy Giuliani, who represented the reaction to to what were. Like David Dinkins was, a more left candidate. He was Black. He represented a lot of community organization at the time. I think actually somebody just made the comparison with the ranked choice vote results that Zohran got today. The only candidate in recent history in New York City who got more straight up like top votes than Zohran is David Dinkins. David Dinkins, I think it was 1988 when he got elected. He was very popular. He represented a huge movement groundswell. That was around the time of Jesse Jackson running for president with the Rainbow Coalition. So it was kind of that style of politics more. DSA was a much smaller organization. Like sometimes we like to say it was almost it was people carrying the flame in a dark time through the 80s and 90s for the left. But he had an association with the style of politics that we have. But there was not mobilization or organization outside of the mayor office itself. So that allowed the reaction to really outpace what the administration was trying to do. Another more recent example in Chicago is Brandon Johnson, who was elected as a progressive with the backing of unions like Chicago Teachers Union, which has been, pretty radical union who's helped win a lot of major things in the run-up to Brandon Johnson becoming mayor. But as mayor, progress kind of stalled out. There are a lot of reasons for it. Chicago DSA members have, I think, pretty interesting analyses of why that's the case. Like they never endorsed him. Like I think they had various reasons to be a little skeptical. But one of the critiques, I think, has been that it did still have this kind of technocratic approach to government. And there wasn't really much outside organizing to achieve the goals that the campaign had led with. So these are lessons that we're really taking right now. New York City is an even bigger city than Chicago. The scale of all the departments, the offices that would need to be appointed is even bigger. So it's definitely a daunting challenge, but I think we're up to the task. There are things to consider around like preemption. Like can the city government pass things, or is it preempted by the state, preventing those things? So I think we have people looking into that. But I think there's at the core is the understanding that as mayor, again, it's not just about getting the right people in the positions to then do the right things. We're going to need to keep organizing. Like the 50,000 people who turned out as volunteers for the campaign, we need to figure out how to keep them engaged and continue organizing. People said this a lot about Obama's election in 2008. Elected with a massive campaign operation, a lot of volunteers, and then the campaign made the choice to totally demobilize that. And the rest is history. So I think we really intend this to be a different style of politics. We're going to try something that hasn't been done in many decades in the U.S. So it's going to be our biggest experiment yet. But we have a lot of support and a lot of excitement and a lot of serious intention to get things done.
I mean, there's a lot to be excited about, and if anything, it's been interesting seeing people freak out. Matt, could you set up this Hakeem Jeffries clip we have here?
Well, yeah, Jeffries is doing Sunday show interview, and of course he's asked about the big news out of his state, and he's like he was when Ro Khanna had a war powers resolution, and they asked like, "Have you looked at this?" He's like, "Nah, I hadn't seen it yet." Jeffries is playing aloof, and I wonder. I've heard that he knows who DSA is, so I was a little bit surprised to hear him say, "I don't know who Zohran is," but yeah, this is him on Sunday show.
He definitely knows.
Let's start with the big news, Leader Jeffries, out of your hometown. Mamdani won a big victory. Have you endorsed him yet?
I have not. We had a conversation on Wednesday morning. Where I congratulated him on the campaign that he ran, a campaign that clearly was relentlessly focused on the high cost of living in New York City and the economy. He outworked, he out-communicated, and he out-organized the opposition, and that's clearly why he was successful.
So what's holding you back from endorsing him right now?
Well, we don't really know each other well. Our districts don't overlap. I have never had a substantive conversation with him.
All right.
And so
any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's cope. Hakeem Jeffries is definitely aware of DSA. We have a bunch of candidates or people who got elected to state senate, state assembly in and overlapping with his district for Congress. So he's definitely aware. He's very actively supported people who've run against DSA candidates. So yeah, I think the political machine of the Democratic establishment in New York City and federal. I mean, yeah, Hakeem Jeffries had a whole apparatus that got him elected to Congress in the first place from New York City, and it's directly tied to the national Democratic establishment. So
what's your message here? I mean, you're co-chair of DSA. The Democrats are, losing across the board. I mean, we just came out of a historic and devastating election. In the rest of the show, we're talking about this new Project 2029 plan that some of them are cooking up, which is just, a gallery of some of like the most entrenched centrist Democrats who have been in politics forever, trying to rebrand their stuff as something new. Colin Allred announced that he's going to run again for Senate here. I mean, Zohran kind of upset the establishment in New York. Do you have any message for Democrats who might be looking for a way to beat the right or be more successful than they have in recent years?
Yeah, I mean, just look at what Zohran actually did. It's just very clear. It's not a mystery. I think they're really bending over backward to try to process it in some different way to justify it, or just to continue the slander and attacks that some of them have been accelerating, like the Islamophobia that's coming from some quarters, like Kristen Gillibrand and others. It's really completely shameful and disgusting, like what they're resorting to, because they can't process that you can just run on popular things that people like that are possible and that actually resonates, so the popularity of Zohran, like this shows the total collapse of the Democratic Party establishment. Like, you're not saying anything that people believe. You're not doing anything to make them believe it. And people can see that. People can see just months after the presidential election. I think Hakeem Jeffries was saying, like, well, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
I'm just the party leader in the minority. Like, there's nothing I can do. And people see that, So it's like, this is just, either you change and like start to actually deliver and credibly campaign on these types of things, or get out of the way. Like, it's very simple.
I got two pieces of news on that. First, happened this a little bit earlier this afternoon on Politico. Gillibrand apologizes to Mamdani over quote, jihad comments.
Thanks for that. I haven't seen the substance of it, but that's a nice gesture.
It's also a normal thing for I don't know, like a top-ranking Democrat to have to apologize over. I mean, just bizarre that they're using language like this. This is
No, it's really shocking. You know, like again, like as somebody who grew up Muslim, like in New York City after 9/11, like, you know, you become desensitized to a certain level of this type of rhetoric from the right, like the type of people who, you know, were really enabled through the Bush administration and then as a reaction to Obama. But to now see it coming from leading Democrats, it's really like mask off, you know, especially after coming up on 2 years of genocide in Gaza that's been enabled under a Democratic administration. I think it really just shows how completely out of touch and bankrupt a lot of people in leadership are in this party, as well as Republicans.
Yeah, and just one other one here. This is from What 46 Has Done, the Biden Defense Squad. Who I hadn't been following, but I did appreciate this tweet about Zohran turning out young people. They say, a big part of why I'll support Zohran going forward is because for years I've been like, quote, well, if you guys want to win, why don't you actually go out and vote instead of just tweeting? And now that they have done that, I can't really be like, no, I didn't mean like that. Now, I will say, I would love to see a lot more of that than I am.
Great reflection, you know? I like to see that. That's great.
Yeah. So let's keep addressing like these. Let's say, okay, first of all, if you're not a socialist, join DSA. Like, you should just be, right? Okay, but let's say you're stubborn and you want to remain like just some vague progressive votes Democrat type person. I think the Lander thing was interesting because I think there's a lot of distrust for, I think, pretty obvious reasons on certain ways certain campaigns have been run between progressives and the socialist left. And this was almost like, I wouldn't say it was completely without bumps, but I am very impressed that they landed this. And I also think it kind of shows other progressives elsewhere, like, this is the way, instead of throwing the left overboard to try to get goodies from like Cuomo's or whoever's Cuomo in my town.
Yeah, I think it's really like it. To me, like, it's so resonant, obviously, for those of us who remember the 2020 presidential primary, just the way that everybody else consolidated against Bernie. You know, like the Elizabeth Warren campaign just chose not to support Sanders as clearly the most viable like possibility that wasn't what the establishment was doing. So I think that, you know, there have been a lot of feelings that have accumulated over time by seeing this pattern repeatedly happen again and again, where progressives who seem close enough and like aligned in many ways just still choose to align against what is the alternative. So to see the way that Lander and Mamdani cross-endorsed each other, and Brad Lander really, you know, just showed a lot of solidarity in ways that were powerful. The Colbert clip that they did together where, you know, Brad Lander was, you know, helping provide cover against these accusations of anti-Semitism that are just so pervasive because Zohran has been pro-Palestine. So I think just seeing that, you know, having that kind of validator is powerful. I think it shows that like a level of principle, but also reflecting the power, you know, of the base that was organized around Zohran. Like, ultimately, if you want to be part of whatever happens next, like that just clearly is the alternative. It is being demonstrated as viable. It's not just based on like moral calculations or something. So I think there's all sorts of ways that it made sense for somebody like Brad Lander or others who campaigned in the mayoral race to support Zohran and ultimately come around. Yeah, it's just like it shows how completely, like, again, the Democratic establishment has just collapsed to a degree that is really visible to everybody. So I think any number of these people, maybe 2-4 years ago, might have made a different calculation, might have said like, all right, we can just let this be taken care of somehow and, like, you know, prevent a campaign like Zohran's from actually winning. But that's not the calculation they made this time. And I think, you know, at a basic level, that's nice. Like, it shows a good faith and all sorts of things. But I think it also reflects power It shows the lack of power the Democratic establishment has continued to maintain and how it's decayed. And it shows the power of the movement that is building as not just an alternative, but now being poised to govern.
Everybody likes a winner. You've been really generous with your time. I just have one last thing, because we, it is kind of worrying, some of the things that we've seen, obviously from the Democrats, but also from the sitting president of the United States. This clip came out earlier today, and with Trump, sometimes it's hard to know when to take him seriously or when to, sort of treat it as a one-off. But I would take this pretty seriously, and I want to play this into your response.
Your beloved New York City may well be led by a communist soon, Zohran Mamdani, who in his nomination speech said he will defy ICE and will not allow ICE to arrest criminal aliens in New York City. Your message to communist Zohran Mamdani?
Well, then we'll have to arrest him. Look, we don't need a communist in this country, but if we have one, I'm going to be watching over him very carefully on behalf of the nation. We send him money. We send him all the things that he needs to run a government. And by the way, they get about 3 times what you get.
And I cut this because Ron DeSanctimonious goes on a bizarre spiel for like 2 minutes, but we'll get back to Trump in a second.
That's what you get, Ron. We're going to be watching that very carefully. And a lot of people are saying he's here illegally. We're going to look at everything. And ideally, he's going to turn out to be much less than a communist. But right now, he's a communist. That's not a socialist. I've always said, we will not have socialism in this country. In the speeches, I said, well, what? They skipped socialism. And you got a lot of them like that.
I wish we had a clip of something else Trump posted about Zohran on Truth Social, that he's terrible looking and his voice is very good. It's only a matter of time, but I look forward to being able to play that clip. Obviously, Trump is, threatened at many levels by Zohran and what he represents. And it's a ridiculous claim, this administration has been testing the boundaries of what they can get away with and targeting people based on their citizenship status. So, as a little bit of a tangent, it was so powerful just in the past few days to see Zohran on stage with Mahmoud Khalil, who's been released. They showed up at a show of Rami Youssef, the comedian and actor. And that Mahmoud Khalil has been released finally after months of illegal, unjust detention, just for being, protesting for Palestine, shows that this administration cannot get away with targeting people with impunity, especially based on their citizenship status. So I think they're already seeing cracks in their ability to get away with pushing the boundaries of what is legal in this country, and to talk about deporting the who's now the mayor to be of the largest city in the country is just a further escalation. But I think they can't get away with it. I think there's just such a mandate for this, and the mandate that Trump came in with after the election, I think, is already cracking in many ways. So to try to paint his affiliation with a socialist organization, I think, is just further flailing. I think the more we and like Zohran and just others explain what we're doing and socialism as part of a long American tradition, I think it's just really resonating with so many people. And I think again, I would refer to what Zohran said, like in his victory speech. He cited FDR and then just had such a beautiful line, like we don't have to choose between being free and being fed. Like we can have both. We can demand what we deserve. And this is a movement that shows, like, New Yorkers, hundreds of thousands and soon to be millions of people recognize themselves in this vision of democracy. And that's such a strong counterpoint to what is happening at the federal level of the government. And Trump is threatened by that, and he should be.
Well, Ashik, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this. I mean, people should get involved. How can they get involved with this movement to fight Trump and fight for a better future?
Yeah, join DSA. There's nothing like being part of an organization. You can spend all your time just like doom scrolling, like looking at all the horrible things, the atrocities being unleashed day after day by this government. But the alternative to that is collective action. Like, there are so many ways to plug in, even just, being a dues paying member, like, our collective resources help us punch way above our weight. So we just passed 80,000 members across the country, which, in a country of 300 million people, that may not seem like a lot, but our members are active members, and like there are all sorts of ways to participate.
Got nearly 500,000 people to vote for one of for one of y'all. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for each one of those members, there's like 10 other people who are like, yeah, we support that, and like 10 times more who would be willing to vote. So this really adds up. We're building the politics of the future, and this is the time to join. It's as easy as signing up on our website, dsausa.org, and just click the join link.
Hell yeah, we'll promote that to everybody as well. Thank you again, friend. Always great speaking with you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome back. Yeah, it was really great having Ashik on the program, and y'all should join DSA if you haven't already. Now you're looking mighty fine. Where'd you get that?
Left Reckoning. Say what's the actual URL? The Left Reckoning store. leftreckoning.com/store.
Leftreckoning.com/store. That is, I love that hat. The Left Reckoning. What are we calling that? Is that the barbecue hat, the trucker hat? It's great. I wear that all the time. If you're feeling a little fancy, right? That's a nice everyday hat. That's going out, walking around, cooking up a good meal for your friends. If you're going to the country club and you want to look a little something fancy, we also have these Left Reckoning Club member hats as well. It really helps us out a lot if y'all can get that. It also spreads the word. It's always great seeing. I mean, I see people actually around here in Austin all the time in Left Reckoning merch, which is always a really nice thing to see. Perfect time for it. We also got tank tops, all kinds of stuff. So if you haven't picked up some Left Reckoning merch, you should certainly do
I like
so.
this hat because it kind of looks like it's North Dakota shaped, even though it's just a rectangle, because North Dakota is that close to a rectangle.
I think I told you this when I was making that hat. I tried to have it be Texas and North Dakota, but it just kind of looked, they're just like a random rectangle next to Texas. Looked a little weird. If any North Dakotans, creative ones, have any kind of like North Dakota theme ideas for Left Reckoning stuff, we would certainly love to incorporate the grand images of that great.
Ooh, we should go back to the cartoonist for the nonpartisan.
Oh, yeah.
There's some bangers back there.
That's a great idea. Well, look, I wanted to just really quick on the Ashik and Zohran conversation, just do a quick update, because we talked about that Trump threat, and I think we should take that very seriously, frankly. I have this statement from Zohran that I wanted to share, and I think people should share, retweet it. I know it's got a lot of views on Instagram as well. I think this is important. I think this is a great statement here. My statement on Donald Trump's threat to deport me and his praise for Eric Adams, who the president helped out of legal accountability. This is a statement. The president of the United States has just threatened to have me arrested, stripped of my citizenship, put in a detention camp, and deported. Not because I have broken any laws, but because I will refuse to let ICE terrorize our city. His statements don't just represent an attack on our democracy, but an attempt to send a message to every New Yorker who refuses to hide in the shadows. If you speak up, they will come for you. We will not accept this intimidation. That Trump included praise for Eric Adams in his authoritarian threats is unsurprising, but highlights the urgency of bringing an end to this mayor's time in City Hall. At the very moment when MAGA Republicans are attempting to destroy the social safety net, kick millions of New Yorkers off of health care, enrich their billionaire donors at the expense of working class families, it is a scandal that Eric Adams echoes this president's division, distraction, and hate. Voters will resoundingly reject it in November. So absolutely, and obviously we stand in complete solidarity with Zohran. And Trump stuff is tough because he always does. He makes these kind of outlandish things. This is serious. I mean, this is something that even if he's just trying to be funny or provocative or whatever, having the president say, one, he's going to lock up political opponents is horrendous enough. Talking about stripping American citizens of their citizenship is so beyond the pale. That it's something that just needs to be resoundingly rejected by everybody.
And what Trump is doing here is calculated, and it goes toward the sort of Star Wars exhaust port of the Democratic Party, which is their support for Israel, which is explained Kristen Gillibrand's comments earlier. Giant AIPAC taker explains Hakeem Jeffries' hesitance to endorse him. And that's a huge problem because they are leaving it open, just like all this stuff is left open with Trump saying it's about border security. And now all of a sudden we have people who wrote op-eds in college being detained. It is something that the leadership of the Democrats cannot or have not up until now been able to counteract, because they take money from the lobby that's actually pushing Trump most aggressively on this. And not even just like the liberal Democratic Majority for Israel, AIPAC. AIPAC is a Republican ass organization. Okay, never mind that it's about for Israel, right? Like, it's a Republican thing, and that's what it's pushing. And so Trump knows that. He knows that he can't just go at all Muslims like he did in the Muslim ban in the first term, right? Like, because that'll get people react to that. But if all of a sudden you put it in a national security context and make this stuff about, oh, he said Israel's global intifada or whatever the fuck, right? Like, now all of a sudden you let people start playing a different kind of ball game. And I do thank Kathy Hochul, governor of my state, for coming out and saying if Trump comes for Zohran, he'll have to deal with her. That is, good. And that frankly should be what an entire party does when this sort of outrageous authoritarian threat is leveled towards a star young politician. And shame on all the other ones that can't come to his defense or are distracted by some other minutia.
100%. No, and we'll be covering this, and I think everything you said there is 100% on board. On a lighter note, I do say, before we get over to these other things, I do have one last Zohran thing, because it's too good, because it involves one of our very good friends and comrades. We'll see if folks can pick it out. If not, we'll explain it to them. This is from Eric Adams' War Room. Who's already trying to attack Zohran, which is great. All of these attacks on him just make him seem cooler, because these people are completely out of touch. But anyways, this is Zohran and Jabari Brisport saying, "Socialist teachers rock." You might recognize the name of the person who they are shouting out here.
What's going on?
Hey, what's up, Paul Prescott?
We are out here in Albany, and we are hoping that you bring home the big W tomorrow. Much, much love.
Much love. Socialist teachers rock.
Let's go.
Let's go, Paul.
And so do their friends and roommates.
Let's go. And if y'all don't recognize it, that's Paul Prescott, our good friend and comrade, who we'll hopefully have on the show again sometime soon. But really nice seeing that shout out, and very funny to watch the Eric Adams people trying to attack Zohran for being a good member of his political organization.
And that Jabari and also Paul, like you hear about, and again, like Zohran is amazing. He's got charisma, right? I'm not trying to downplay that, but Jabari is a very charismatic guy too. Like
100%.
This isn't like, what's rare is to have this kind of charisma and then do it to sell like charter schools for Citibank, like Barack Obama did. That's 100%. The rare thing.
It does crack me up though to see a bunch of people freaking out about Paul, and right here, sickening.
Well, so
LBJ hater 9000 says sickening. I'm gonna give that a little like there. You should be sickened by it. If you're an LBJ hater, you should be sickened by this.
Let's stay just on Zohran a little bit here, because Dave Rubin has weighed in on this.
Oh my
and
God.
We do got to get to the big beautiful bill, but Dave Rubin has an interesting theory about how this is all going to play out. And I mean, I'll tell you,
I love it when he starts.
Somebody who does not underrate DSA's organizational capabilities is our Dave Rubin, our boy from Florida, Miami. Here he is.
I'll actually make a bold prediction. If he becomes mayor, I think for about a year it probably will go well. Because one of the things, and mark my words, timestamp this thing, I don't know, you got a book or a notebook over there or something. Just make note of what I'm about to say. If he wins, I think New York City, everything's going to go well for a year. Because what they are going to do, because the Democrats are also in charge of all the foot soldiers, they're in charge of the Antifa, Hamas people out there and everything. Once they have installed their Islamist progressive hero, they will get all the violence off the streets. They will stop doing all of those bad things. So it will make it artificially seem like it's good. And then for a year, people will be like, oh my God, we got what we want. And they'll be in that stupor of utopian socialist idiocy. and they will all be playing along. And then it will take a little time for it to break down, but I don't think it's going to go to hell overnight. I think a lot of people are overestimating what might happen. They control the foot soldiers and the violence and the craziness on the streets. So if they just shut it off, if they get their guy to make it look good, I'm just telling you guys, I have a pretty good track record. Just make note of that.
Why didn't they use those foot soldiers when Kamala Harris was running for president?
Well, because we've been preparing for our own ascendance of power. Look, I'm part of the squad that goes out and does petty crimes just to make the numbers look bad, because we have to prepare for this.
Stealing all the chicken nuggets from McDonald's.
Exactly. I'm doing a lot of property damage. I'm assaulting people on the subway, but they can't find me because I'm wearing a mask, and we don't let the cops down there. So I'm doing a lot of fare evasion just to like get the numbers up there. So when Zohran is in, I take a little break, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's nobody like, kicking over old ladies. And, it's a pretty, I think it's interesting. We're responsible for all of the crime, us and the Antifa folks.
Well, it'll be nice, especially when you're able to catch it at work, which I'm sure you're looking forward to.
It's been helping me get in shape, though, all of this, all the assaults I've been committing.
Well, there you have it, folks. Well, we got a monster thing. All right. Talking about socialists and freeloaders and all of y'all, we got a special treat. We were going to put up the wall. We were going to build the wall. We were going to have to put up the paywall over here for the post game. Typically, you only get that by subscribing at patreon.com/leftreckoning to support Matt and I, supplement Matt's Antifa checks. But I fucked up, and I don't think we can do that. So the wall's coming down tonight. We will have an open post game, which means all you freeloaders, you get a little extra treat. Why don't y'all come over? Put a couple bucks in the hat. Patreon.com/leftreckoning. Keep this show going. You get access not only to the post games, you also get those Sunday shows. And those Sunday shows, that's what I live for. I live for Sunday shows. I think Sunday shows are my favorite. Matt and I, very casual. We're able to cover a lot of topics that we don't cover on the public main show because we're a little bit freer there because we're talking amongst friends. You don't want to miss those. Patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to all of that. But
we did a great Tony Judd reading of an excellent essay called "Israel: The Alternative" that I would, I think it's really worth the price of admission.
100%, and highly requested by our members to make that public because our members care a lot about what all of y'all are seeing on the other side. But you should become a member and support us. Patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to all of that. But we do try to make the show as accessible to everybody. But we got to have folks step up to help us keep doing that. Anyway, enough about all that. Matt, let's get to this this big, beautiful bill. I mean, I want to talk about Holly, but this was a massive assault on working people, and we should be very clear about this. I mean, we are talking about them kicking off millions of people off of healthcare. What is it, 18% cut in Medicaid. These are the most recent numbers that I was able to get. 18% cut in Medicaid, 20% cut for SNAP. Really, really malicious, nasty stuff. These work requirements. Well, I don't know, but let's get into the arguments against it in a second. Let me just catch people up really quick, unless you had anything you want to add here. It passed by a whisker. J.D. Vance had to roll himself down, bring his Diet Mountain Dew to cast the tie-breaking vote so that it could happen, so that they were able to get this through the Senate. We can get into some of the defections in a second, but this is a very, very damaging thing. This is something a lot of us have been worried about for a while. There's a hope that there might be enough discord in the Republican Party to sort of take it down, but the fact that they're able to get over that is a very worrying sign.
Yeah, I mean, the basic way to think about it is, in terms of the cuts, almost $1 trillion to Medicaid cuts, and we talked about this with Adam Gaffney, but in the forms of things like these bullshit work requirements, which are actually paperwork requirements, because they know full good and well that plenty of people will be working, but won't go through the hurdle of proving it and getting the type of paperwork done to get cared, and that's going to, all told, cut off about 11 million people from health insurance by the 2030s. That's just 11 million people. That 11 million translates to about 100,000 or so just dead people, people that will have been alive but won't, because why? Where does this money go? It goes to I think 2/3 maybe to tax cut, and the rest of the third to ICE for bonuses and concentration camps. So yeah, that's where we're at.
I mean, it's a massive wealth transfer to the super rich. I mean, so I want to talk about that class war aspect of it in a second. But I mean, as you were saying, Matt, 20 million people getting kicked off of their health care. These work requirements are complete bullshit. And anybody who sits there and says, well, people really need it, they can fill out paperwork, is incredible for the people who are always talking about, how big the government is, the problems of bureaucracy and all this kind of
No
stuff. To sit
shit.
here and be like, oh, well, you just go down and fill out your paperwork. Everybody knows exactly what this is about. It's about creating burdens and difficulty so that people who need it, right? Especially people who are working a lot, by the way, right? The exact kind of folks who you would want, who are, at least this is trying to imply, are the most deserving people. Those are the people who are going to be kicked out on it. And, you talk about adding paperwork, being able to document 8 hours of work a month is not an easy thing to do, especially for people who are working in those kind of like low wage, low income jobs, right? You're creating these kind of extra hurdles. And again, this is on purpose, this kind of idea that this is going to save money. In fact, this is one of those things where creating this extra bureaucracy ends up costing us more, right? Enforcing and administrating all this extra bureaucracy and paperwork ends up costing more than just, in having these programs be open to folks who are eligible to them. It is 100%, it's a paperwork requirement. I think that's perfectly put. It's also the way that this is set up, it's not creating, tax breaks for everyday folks. What is actually going to end up happening is we're going to see wealth decreases for working people, 2.5% in after-tax transfer income. This is from a Yale report on the budget lab at Yale on this bill, right? So we're seeing people losing money, right? Yeah, maybe that might be a way to fight inflation if you make people poor. Now, of course, the folks at the very top will be getting a boon and plenty of money. They'll see significant increases in their after-tax income. This is 100% one of the most damaging things that we've seen on the national level for a long time. And just reminding folks about like why we had a program like Medicaid is because in the 60s, folks like LBJ said, hey, we don't want people to be dying on the street, right? We live in a wealthy country, and that is something that should be seen as unacceptable. And, apart from the nastiness of like the Republicans, and like the scam of this kind of thing, it really does just show the fundamental moral degradation of this country, right? There were something that should be seen and understood as an achievement of human society, right? That we have got to a place as a society, as a people, right? As a species, that, yeah, we can take care of folks so that people don't have to die because of, treatable, preventable medical episodes. That we were able to push back on that. And now to see that being rolled back because some freaks want to get another boat, absolutely disgusting, purely hedonistic, amoral society that would do something like that.
Yeah, completely vampiric. We talk about, like Bill, I mean, this is, yeah, I mean, it's just disgusting.
100%. And not to mention the damage that these kind of programs are going to do to certain geographic areas. I mean, there's a kind of sinister and cynical part of the American population too that kind of loves to see folks suffer, and that is unfortunately a Democrat and a Republican phenomenon. I don't say this gleefully, but what this will do is it will harm rural America tremendously. Rural hospitals are a perfect example of why we need to have public control of these kind of systems instead of private control of this. This is going to lead to hospital closings all across the U.S. because Medicaid is one of the biggest funders of these rural hospitals, right? It's already hasn't been doing enough. That funding needed to be increased, not decreased. And now that you're going to see that get pulled back, you're going to see plenty of working class Americans who live in in the rural U.S. who go through this odious 80-hour a week, a month reporting hoop, right? And get their paperwork in on time, make sure that they don't misspell a name or put a wrong address or anything like that. And then have nowhere to go to get health care except to drive to a major city because the rural hospitals have closed because they can't function without this kind of money.
Here's J.D. Vance. Unbelievable.
Tremendous. Read that for us.
It says everything else, the Congressional Budget Office score, the proper baseline, the minutiae of the Medicaid policy. Again, this is the largest cuts to Medicaid in the program's history. This is one of the largest rolling backs of the social safety net in this country's history.
Yeah.
This motherfucker calls it minutiae of Medicaid policy. I mean, oh, let me just finish. Is immaterial compared to the ICE money and immigration enforcement provision. So, you might get thrown off health care, as he says in his fucking book. But look, we're going to have tanks for the ICE guys, and they're going to have $10,000 to spend on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, it truly, to sit here and talk like that, I mean, look, don't call me naive. I'm just saying that this is the way that this guy presents himself as somebody who supposedly understands the hurt of working class Americans. Somebody like myself, I grew up, on programs like SNAP, right? I used to have Medicaid when I was a kid. A large reason that I am alive and healthy is because of these kind of programs. Thank the Lord that they existed. J.D. Vance speaks as if he is somebody who also comes from that kind of background, right? He's supposed to be the tribune of those folks. Finally, we have a voice in the halls of power. And what he's saying here is no, it's great. 20 million people kicked off of healthcare. We got to make sure that the Gestapo can buy another Jeep Wrangler. I mean, just truly, truly despicable stuff. And I wanted to, just on this, we'll stay on J.D. Vance before we get to this other figure, because there's been a lot of talk about this new working class Republican Party, right? And hell, man, I would be all about it if we just had a bunch of working class political parties in this country, people fighting for everyday folks. I'd be very happy. Now, of course, you can't believe that shit for a second, because somebody like J.D. Vance is not in the position that he is in because he is a fighter for working class people, right? J.D. Vance is in the position that he is in because people like Peter Thiel and the super rich and the powerful in this country wanted to have somebody like that who could talk about Diet Mountain Dew or whatever, do whatever song and dance for folks, while also protecting all their material interests. Literally, the thing that you are supposed to, the perspective that you're supposed to bring, that you argue that you're bringing, is that of the downtrodden in this country. And you're saying, oh yeah, by the way, the devastation that we are doing to those folks is immaterial to a pay raise for ICE folks. Jeff Stein had a great piece in the Washington Post about this. J.D. Vance's prior vision for populism is largely absent from GOP tax bill. While Senator Vance proposed sharp break in the party's economic orthodoxy that some experts say is not reflected in the legislation. Highly suggest people reading it. What is true, all of these things that J.D. Vance is supposed to have been bringing to the ticket, bringing into the party, obviously are completely absent in this bill.
Yeah, and I've a long-time hater on J.D. Vance. Do we want to shift to our other little boy from Missouri?
Just please.
For this moment. So I tweeted this out in June about our boy Josh Hawley, because Josh Hawley made a bunch of noise saying things like this in May of
Mighty Man of Valor.
Our mighty man of valor himself. Oh, look at this. What is this? In May, Josh Hawley don't cut Medicaid. Oh, thanks, Josh. I appreciate that sentiment. That's really cool. I agree with you. Here is another him being interviewed here a month or so ago.
I walked through him and he said, oh, wow, that's very surprising. He said, I'm surprised that they made all these changes. And to the degree they did, I said, I am too. He was real clear to Senate Republicans just 2 weeks ago. Don't touch anything else on Medicaid. Take the House framework, tweak it if you need to, but do not do anything else. And this Senate framework is really, it departs from his framework big time.
So there's our populist Josh Hawley. Now, when all this was going on in June, said this. This guy will 1,000% cave on Medicaid cuts. Stone cold lock. For those of you who traveled to Vegas or maybe to Poly Market Studios to gamble on that, you will have made some money, because here's Josh Hawley's statement after voting for this thing. Actually, we got a video of him. Let's not read this statement. Here's our boy. The audio's a bit weird on this. I'm not sure how they recorded this, but you get the point.
I mean, we can't be cutting health care for working people and for poor people in order to constantly give special tax treatment to corporations and other entities. And we've delayed that in this bill. But unless we take further changes or take further steps, it will happen in future years. And I'm opposed to this. If we're going to be a working class party, we've got to protect working people. And the Medicaid stuff in here, I think is bad. And I think we've delayed the worst of it. And in the short term, for my state, it's going to be fine. But on a going forward basis, we cannot go on like this. I think the party has a lot of thinking to do.
It has a lot of thinking to do. You know what, Josh Hawley? I know you're a religious buddy. Tell the truth, shame the devil. This whole thing of we've delayed it. No, you didn't. You've made it phase in slightly slower so the lobsters don't know they're boiling all at the same goddamn time. But you know full good and well that you are not going to get that party back to what? Invest more money into Medicaid? Are you kidding me? You think you get the Republicans to come around for that? But it's actually worth reading his statement here because we're talking about them sounding like liberals. I mean, listen to this language. RECA, the new BBB, is generational legislation for Missouri and will finally deliver justice for survivors in the St. Louis region. Some carve out. Josh Hawley's an environmentalist against government waste. That's another one of his populist things he does. And when this reconciliation bill is signed into law, Missouri will also see new health care funding and big tax cuts for working families. I call on the House to quickly pass this legislation and send it to President Trump's desk. But let me be clear. I will continue to do everything in my power to review future Medicaid cuts. No, these aren't future ones. They're the ones you just signed for. Any sort of cuts, they eventually go into place. Yeah, they're phased in. This is the cuts that you just voted for. And he finishes, if Republicans want to be the party of the working class, we cannot cut health insurance for working people. You did. Yeah. And you aren't being honest about it. So,
yeah, I mean, it's always, why don't you join, your colleagues from Kentucky or Maine? I mean, there were Republicans who voted no here. To sit here and have made such a think about this for so long, right? Rhetorical as it was, and then cave like this when literally, you have the opportunity to do it. J.D. Vance had to waddle down there to cast the tie-breaking vote. You could have been the one that pushed it over. You want to increase your influence in the party as somebody who has the ability to make or break legislation so that you can get things you want. You have the perfect opportunity. This should be great for somebody who's a political climber like this. What it shows is that, despite his claim, our friend Hawley is not a mighty man of valor. He is a big ass coward.
You know who is a mighty man of valor? Is Alaska's Lisa Murkowski. Because frankly, she actually did get a bunch of carve-outs in exchange for her vote where Hawley didn't do anything. If you are a Hawley Republican listening to this, I mean, welcome. And you support a big-time cuck. Because here's what Murkowski got for her vote. To completely just destroy the working class. Tax breaks for whaling captains, tax breaks for Alaskan fishing villages, exemption from SNAP cost sharing requirements, which 10 other states got to partake in as well, which is another thing is you could have. There was just no desire to stop the worst of this bill. There could have been less provision because they're already not giving a fuck about the deficit, right? They're making up complete funny money justifications about when the accounting starts and when it counts against the parliamentarian or whatever. It's all lies. Mm-hmm. There was no need to be this fucking cruel, but the party wants it. They want it. This is what they've been planning for. This is their big chance to get it, and they fucking got it, man. This is the way the right for basically a generation has been an anti-New Deal party. This is just another piece of that apple that they've been wanting to bite for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So as it stands now, we got it'll go back to the House where some lunatics are complaining that it doesn't harm working people enough. We'll see if there are enough fights in there to tank it, but it looks like this, has a pretty decent shot of coming into being. Fight as much as you can, do everything you can to try to stop it. Call your Congress folks, particularly people living in Republican states, remind them about how much damage it's going to cause. Remind them that there will be consequences for this. But this is just another kind of wake up call that not only, we've done it all in this program today. We started with the failures of the Democratic Party, how damaging they have been, how little that they have learned. Obviously, we see the damage that the Republican Party is waging against working people. The only way out is through the kind of politics that we saw in the Mamdani campaign and building an actual alternative, a democratic socialist movement that can win, not just complain from the outside. That is the only hope, because both of these parties are out there to destroy you and your family. I mean, it is that dire. I am not being, hysterical by saying that. It is that. So get involved, engage in politics, and be serious about it too. No more of this ultra stuff. We need to get serious about winning power because the stakes are too fucking high.
And it just fascinated me. I think I mentioned this already, maybe on the Sunday show, but I look back at, or maybe last week even, when we mentioned a phone banking thing on TMBS that was, among other candidates, Zohran, when he was running in 2020. Mm-hmm. And just those folks, all of the DSA members who have been working and getting together at each other's places and putting this work in, are so goddamn inspiring. And that's, people should want to be a part of that, because now's the time. Like, now is really go time. There really is a vacuum here, and it can be taken advantage of.
Exactly. No, 100%. Well, we are kind of officially in the post game. Again, as we said, we're having this post game be open to everybody because I fucked up the tech. But y'all can, still support the show at patreon.com/leftreckoning. To all of our patrons, thank you so much for supporting us. I hope y'all don't mind the extra guests today. We got a couple fun things, and then we'll take some questions. Just a reminder, the way you ask questions, only for patrons, go in the Discord, go into the live discussion room, ask your question at mod, at symbol MOD, and Matt and I will be happy to take those towards the end. Get them in now, because sometimes you'll wait till the very, very end, and then I miss them all because they're coming in. Get them in now, and we'll get to them in a couple minutes. Matt, do we want to get to some of these other things before we get to questions and all that?
Well, I think we have to avoid Rogan, don't we?
We probably do. Do.
Patreon.com/leftreckoning if you want us to get to a point where we can take a complete L on the copyright for the night.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about something probably a little bit controversial. Matt, did you see any of, because a bunch of people are asking about this in the chat, and I'm just going to address it right now because I'm fucking tired of it. Did you see Shama Sopwant's attack on Zohran Mamdani over this past week? Here's a part of me is like, part of me doesn't even want to address it, because this is somebody who is literally just trying to stir up controversy to make themselves relevant in the face of like the success of, like the left in the US, right? But it's worth addressing here because I find it to be truly ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it seems pretty silly.
So her accusation was that basically, since Mamdani said, thank you so much for conceding to me, Cuomo. That proves that he is somehow kind of a Democrat plant who's going to be unwilling to fight for the working class. She says, she thinks it was a great campaign, did a lot, but is basically trying to maintain this kind of air of superiority. I'll just be clear, and people can go and look up the clip if they want to see all this kind of stuff. I'll just say this. Zohran does not need to take your advice, because the difference between you and Zohran is like Zohran is already now like a national figure with influence and is the future of our political movement, right? It's great that you were on the city council in Seattle, right? I was a big supporter of you for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. You left that position to start a podcast. And the first thing that you did with that podcast was attack the UAW when it was on one of the largest strikes of our lifetime, because you didn't like the tactic that Sean Fain was using. So their critique of Sean Fain and the UAW is that they wanted them on day one to call for a full-on walkout. What Sean Fain and the UAW did instead was strategic agitation. And they were keeping, and it was very, very successful. Y'all can go back and watch our coverage of it, because the bosses didn't know
what plants were going to close when. It cost them tremendous amounts of money. It created tremendous amounts of stress for them. And it was highly successful because guess what? The UAW has revived in many ways the American labor movement from the success of that strike. And did Sean Fain back down? No, Sean Fain is calling for a general strike, something that any socialist should be supporting 100%. The way that you do that, by the way, is not through podcasting, and including myself in this, right, is by actually doing the fucking work, right? So, no, I don't have a lot of care for something like that attacking Zohran, right? Somebody who, has been trying to make a career now out of criticizing, particularly the DSA, right? Which, sorry, they tried to get involved with and take over, and that was rebuffed by the membership of DSA, who was not interested in Socialist Alternative taking over the organization. So anyways, to answer the question about what I think about those kind of criticism, I think that they're nonsense. And I don't think Zohran has any need to listen to this, nor do I think they're even going to come across his desk, because this kind of politics is already operating at such a deeper and more significant level than any of that kind of nonsense on the outside.
Yeah, it's look, it seems to me, just generally speaking, personality disorder more than politics, and it's so the tendency to not do anything is so strong that even the people who have done something end up reverting to being podcasters. And win some power again, and then make those positions. Like, figure it out, do something.
Yeah, so,
I'm sick of the theory here.
So she's going to run, as a congressional candidate. Hey, it would be great if you were able to do that.
Good luck.
It might be difficult, by the way, since you've been throwing stones at every other person in the movement, in the past few months. But also, I will also just say this, right? Because one of her critique and people around her's critique of the DSA is about the Democratic Party, and DSA running people on the ballot line of the Democratic Party. Now, look, I'll say this, and I'll say it time and time again, as I've been saying since I began doing this. I think that we fundamentally need to build a working class party and a working class alternative. I think that the strategy of building up the capacity of working class candidates to win power and our movements to gain power is probably going to come from a multifaceted approach of running people on the Democratic Party ballot line. Because guess what? I'm a materialist, which means I analyze the situation on the ground. I don't have these kind of preconceived notions, almost spiritual notions about what these things are. Guess what the Democratic Party can do about Zohran winning the primary? Nothing. He won the primary. He's on the ballot as a Democrat. They can get mad at him. They can't take anything away from him, right? That is how that party operates. It's not like the Labor Party, which is able to sort of remove people from the ballot line, right? That's why you utilize these kind of strategic primaries, because we can gain power through using it. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't this way in the U.S. In most places, you do need to operate on those ballot lines to be able to get the amount of votes that are necessary to overtake your opponents. That's unfortunate. Now, you'll say, well, Shamba Sawant didn't run as a Democrat in Seattle. Yeah, because guess what? They have nonpartisan elections, right? So that's great if you're able to do that. I think that's a wonderful strategy. We have people on this program all the time who do that. I think that's wonderful. If you're able to do that in a place where you are going up against, established party, Democrat or Republican, then, that could also be a watershed moment. But that's not what happened there. So you don't have to engage in that strategic question in that area, right? And then you're talking about how everyone else needs to do it in their area where they have different dynamics and different ballots. It's just absurd to me. It is absurd to me, and I don't want to pay any more lip service or attention to it. Who knows? People probably get mad at me, so I might have to address it again. But it's been going on for fucking 5 years, and I've kept my mouth shut because I'm all about trying to build unity, as people know. I really am. But this is exhausting to me, because once you start tearing down the work of thousands and thousands of volunteers, right? Years and years of real sustained, dedicated work for an audience of people who just want to hear, you bash figures that they see on the TV, right? It's just exhausting to me. It's not serious. It's not actually about coalition building or building a politics that can win. Sorry.
Yeah. Hope the Patreon goes well.
Okay. Should we do we want to do this Taibbi thing, or do you think we can take some questions? We've gone a little long.
I can just do a little bit of Taibbi thing, but he's a hack at this point. Let me pull this up.
It's just, I mean, it's I'll tell you, it's great to see, though. This is just what it feels like to be winning, right? It's just nice to see the folks from all sides being mad and just like complaining. The Taibbi thing is, ugly, obviously, but it's just like they have something on our side to get mad about because, there's victories here.
What's interesting to me about the Taibbi thing is the trajectory that Glenn's on is just so much more principled.
Yeah, I know.
And like, I don't trust either. I distrust either. I'm kind of the same way.
I'll just say
Glenn is just way more principled.
Yeah, I'll say Glenn. I think Glenn also just has like his own kind of politics that I think for a while we're like close enough to some of ours, and then when that gulf started to widen, I think people, I don't know. I totally get what you're saying. I'm saying like the Glenn thing, like it has been interesting because there was a moment people were sort of talking about them in the same conversation, right? As like the same kind of figure. The Taibbi thing is purely cynical. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Exactly. I'm just wondering if I can find it. I find it very like almost sweet to be back on the same side as Glenn Greenwald on some of these issues. And there was a funny video I saw where he was talking about Zohran, and it was a question like, can you believe the racism being directed at Zohran? And Glenn is not, as he admits in the clip, he's like, look, I don't like to call anything racism. People know me. I'm probably too slow to denounce things as racism. But yes, like what's actually happening to Zohran's racism. But Taibbi has gone the entirely opposite direction. But I will say, when he says he has always been not a socialist, that is true. Mm-hmm. Even going back to his Rolling Stone work during the financial crisis, I saw this because I was his producer, and leftoids would say like, do you know you're working for this guy who says this is about capitalism? And it became relevant to me when they proved to be right, that, the tweets where he said his problem with the big banks during 2008 was that they had an incestuous relationship with the government, making them not really capitalism, which to me is, that's not, I'll just say, my analysis of the situation. I think that's capitalism doing capitalism stuff. And so he's always been staking out this position of, I'm not anti-capitalist. Don't call me anti-capitalist. But he's definitely been content to say support Bernie Sanders or single payer health care, which is, but now like things changed. And look, he had how much of the story should we get into here? He had this, when I worked for him a couple of years ago, he had a book come out about the Eric Garner death. Mm-hmm. And that book was getting a lot of attention. Say somebody even wanted to make a movie about it. And then it blew up because Matt Taibbi wet himself on NPR, unable to address calls for him to contextualize gonzo journalism he did with Mark Ames about Russia. And for months and months, me and other people in Taibbi circle said, just address this, tell them it was a joke, tell them there's no accuser in real life against you or Mark Ames, and that the stuff you wrote about treating Russian, people in the newsroom badly was all satire. He thought he could just avoid it until an interview that he thought was going to go really well ended up being one where he had to walk out of. And that was the end of also my relationship with him, because he just folded up the show for a while. So following that, he's been on this journey where he talks with like really sad old right-wing guys that, I've never even really heard of. And going on the left.
Going on what's his name show? Who's that fucking moron at Fox News? The late night guy, Greg. What's his name?
Gutfeld.
Going on, hanging out with those winners is pretty good. No, and for people who don't know, Taibbi came out with this long ass piece on his Substack called Socialism Wins Its American Normandy. I don't know, Matt, if you want to get into it or just sort of talk about like how funny his responses on Twitter have been.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think sticks out? I don't know if we need to get super deep into it.
Yeah, he says he compares Bernie and Mamdani. He says Bernie nearly captured the Democratic nomination in 2020, despite self-identifying as a Democratic Socialist, unimaginable as recently as the Obama years. While Sanders infamously went on a very strange honeymoon in the Soviet Union and authored books with titles like Our Revolution, It's Okay to be Angry about Capitalism, his politics, by the time he reached Washington, were closer to Eisenhower than Marx, as he pushed ideas like an increased minimum wage, single-payer health care, and drug reimportation to fit the framework of traditional free market America. Sanders grew up dirt poor in Brooklyn and never lost affection for the party of the New Deal, perhaps to a fault, loyalty to the DNC, and figures like pal Joe Biden were a big reason he never reached the White House. Mamdani is different. Born in Uganda to a post-colonial theorist and a future Hollywood director, he's a fancy prep school kid like me and a recent immigrant, and not in itself not bad, but the crises of America's past aren't in his political muscle memory. You'll get a better sense of his beliefs reading Father and Columbia Professor Mahmoud Mamdani's impenetrable Citizen and Subject than you will watching docs about Mario Savio or Woodstock. And unlike Sanders, he's as polished as they come in his conventional political skill department, able to adjust his style for any situation, never losing his cool before crowds or camera. Ironically, in this, he's not unlike Barack Obama. In brackets, I wonder how Mamdani feels about Letitia James breathlessly comparing him to the evil one. That's Obama. Then there's the rap. Donald Trump needed South African artists, the Kiffness, to immortalize They're Eating the Cats, but Zohran Mamdani is a no-shit Queens MC who performed by the name of Cardamom. Anyone who expects suckage will be stunned. And he plays his little video here. Now, what he is getting at is that Zohran, unlike Bernie, is exceptionally dangerous to American politics, and that he's going to do tremendous damage to the country, particularly a lot of focus on his daddy, right? That Mamdani's father, who's a post-colonial theorist, is kind of like put these dangerous ideas into his head. Let me just read this last bit here, the ending of the piece. One of the infuriating surprises of the development of a thriving alt media sector is the fact that a sizable proportion of these entrepreneurial media voices claim to be socialists. Those are the people who scream murder if you suggested that they share profits with lesser sites or sacrifice any autonomy. But don't tell them they don't believe. They have a fetishistic attachments to global resistance movements, even though they mostly come from wealthy families who would be among the first to have their dignity surpluses hoovered up by a real proletarian revolution. Most irritatingly, I've seen this, they feel total impatience with any actual underclass people who resist their vast wisdom on anything from economics to education. These new media
just
pioneers,
to point out, sorry, Taibbi, he admitted it, but he is definitely not one of those people from a lower class background. And okay.
No, but he admits it. But he's one of these guys who decided that he is the spokesperson of all these groups, right? Which is why these attacks are so nasty. And I'll tell you, this is something that I think people need to be careful about, because people play around with it. Because if you're serious about politics, you're always saying, "Hey, yeah, who's not here? How can we grow?" The socialist movement is fairly representative of the U.S. working class, right? It could be better, it could be more engaged, it could be deeper, but this kind of false narrative that it's like the sons and daughters of the rich who are the kind of engine of the success of organizations like the DSA is just factually incorrect. Anyway, these new media pioneers worship Zohran. Don't be surprised if his career becomes the avatar that galvanizes them behind his quest to Lena Dunham's world attitudes. America is only.
Sorry, what does that mean?
So in the piece, basically, he's saying that Zohran is woke and that he's going to turn all of the buses into pro-trans, LGBTQ plus things. I mean, it's nonsense. The thing about Zohran is so amazing is he ran such an explicitly clear campaign. I'm here to help out everyday folks. We want to get free buses. We want to lower rents. We want to get higher wages for people, blah, blah, blah. And also, I don't support killing children in Gaza, and I'm not going to go to a foreign country to pledge allegiance to a foreign nation. Right? That was pretty much the Zohran campaign, and exceptionally clear. Got the message out. Got nearly 500,000 people to vote for him. And yet we have geniuses like Taibbi and geniuses like Donald Trump coming up with all kinds of nonsense about him. Let me just read this last bit, and then I want to throw it to you, Matt. America's, because he has a theory, just like our friend Dave Rubin, about what Zohran's future is going to be like. America's only just getting to know Zohran. My guess is that while he'll take hits for not infrequent outbursts of bullhorn goofery, like his pledge to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he visits New York was a classic. That's buffoonery, by the way.
That's just interesting to me because Matt Taibbi, I will say, is a big time bitch when it comes to Israel and has been this entire genocide since October 7th. The very first time I saw him mention it, he joined in the people making fun of Rashida Tlaib for having the gall to suggest that Israel would bomb a hospital. He thought that that was the left rushing and getting over its skis. Unlike Greenwald, who is a very anti-Israel in a way that I frankly appreciate, Greenwald is afraid of the topic. It's pussy. And he even says, like, oh, it's not really my beat.
You meant Taibbi.
Or yeah, Taibbi is pussy on this topic, and it is glaring. So I mean, to call that, but what bullhornery to say that a wanted international war criminal should be arrested? Yeah. I mean, that's probably crazy to your new audience, Matt Taibbi, but not all of us have to, slop to those hogs.
His embrace of every hot button wokeism Americans learned to groan over a few years ago, in brackets, free bus rides to free gender affirmation treatments for minors. Woo. He'll succeed as a political phenomenon in ways Bernie and AOC never did. The camera loves him. He's not Trump, and he's sure, which counts a lot in the internet age. He is the perfect person at the perfect time to sell the one thing Americans have never bought on impulse. What a prize this country would be for international socialism. Are we dumb enough for this too? Well, there we go. The sad end of a career of a hack.
I think Taibbi thinks the people he's writing to are dumb. I think that's a little bit of that 100%. Leaking out. Yeah.
I mean, it must be. It is feeding time over there. I mean, it's. I mean, this is a guy who sucked up to one of the wealthiest people in the world. I mean, you want to talk about, just being a complete hack, sucking up to the powerful. I find to just be the most depressing thing that you can do for somebody who for years kind of presented themselves as like somebody pushing back against like the elitism of in American politics, the over financialization of this country, to say, hey, you know what, this freak ass billionaire is trying to buy our elections. I like that guy because he's giving me some money.
We didn't even talk about that.
The Musk shit. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I feel bad for some of these folks on this level. It is hard to keep up with, who you need to be nice to, right? Is it Daddy Trump? Is it Musk? It looks like they're fighting again. Musk wants Trump to destroy more of the social safety net, which is pretty despicable. So, it is hard to figure out, who really you need to be sucking up to. So difficult times for these folks.
It's just, unbelievable. The thing about Netanyahu, I can't believe that was in there. Like, just avoid the issue entirely, buddy. Because I did see him mention the globalize the intifada thing, saying that, and also he said that. What did he say? That he voted against. Actually, it pissed me off. So let me pick this up again. I don't know if you have it up, but it's in the first couple of graphs. But he says he mischaracterizes it.
Yeah, let me get. Tell me what it is.
It's about the Holocaust thing. Because the thing about voting to remember the Holocaust, it was
he didn't sign a resolution. Yeah.
Yes, it was a joint it was about not just the Holocaust. Guess what it was also about? Our good friends Israel. It was about confirming and validating Israel. And you can't say it was just about the Holocaust, which is what all the Zionists do. He doesn't want to remember the Holocaust. Well, the fucking resolution said affirms Israel, unbelievable.
No. I mean, it really is despicable. Not really somebody you need to engage with too much. No. Again, folks who are joining us, this is our open post game. Usually these are behind the paywall. If you've been listening all these years and you've wondered what's on the other side, this is it. We have fun. We talk about things that
I swear more.
Matt swears more. People get kind of mad. We're going to do a couple questions. We're only going to take questions from our patrons because we like them.
and they help us keep going. If you want to become a patron, you can sign up at patreon.com/leftreckoning. If you're listening right now, you got a question, you better type that shit right now, because we're going to be moving on real quick. You can do that by going to the live discussion room at MOD. Make sure we get it. First one up, we have Joe Snuffy, who says, some people in my DSA chapter are asking why we should be excited by Zohran's win because he ran as a Democrat. The argument I've seen has two parts to it. The first is that him winning won't matter because the Dems will block any of his not really socialist policies from being implemented. That's sarcasm. And even if he does implement them, it will just revitalize the Democratic Party establishment somehow, and that will foreclose on the possibility for a workers' revolution. Can you please help me talk to them? Yeah, I mean, look, there's two things. We already talked about this a little bit. The idea, for example, that like Zohran is now like owned by the Democrats is untrue. In fact, in a way, he's kind of owning them. They don't have the ability to kick him off of the ballot. Now, that doesn't mean that we're clear and free and out of the woods. I mean, this is like politics. This is the real struggle about this. Is like, how do you keep politicians in line with the movement? Guess what? That's the question if they run on like the free socialist ballot line or on the Democratic Party ballot line, because we have the same ability to influence these folks in either of those situations, right? There's no difference. If somebody runs as an independent, will they continue to represent the movement, or if they run as a Democrat? Because guess what? Both of those institutions are toothless in their ability to recall and punish members. Now, what we do is we engage them in our own political organizations. Luckily enough, there is one, and it's called the Democratic Socialists of America, which Zohran is a member, and he has responsibilities to that movement. Now, he can betray them, right? But then he's betrayed them, right? We have this is the only way we can build these kind of checks, right? So this kind of talk about like, oh, if he ran as an independent, then he wouldn't be able to betray us is bullshit. He'd be able to he'd probably have an easier time, doing it without any kind of like structure around them. So on that level of like corruption, that you don't get out of that question in any kind of circumstance. It's a huge win. It's a massive win. I don't understand how you can't see this as a massive win. Yeah, please get in.
Like, can I just suggest, like, this is too much thinking and talking and not enough doing.
Yeah,
like, right? Like if you try to think about this stuff in terms of, can we think of a way this goes wrong? It's like, yes, yeah, yeah, you can. But like I always said about like the squad, the initial squad, like they were only going to be so good as the sort of forces that followed them as well. And so like AOC is made better by having Zohran as a national, mayor of a national city like New York City.
Zohran's a national figure at this point, man. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
And
you want to talk about Mayor Pete, like, this guy,
right.
yeah.
And it's like the constellation needs to get stronger and stronger. It's not about getting the individual stars to sort of burn hotter, and like that's what it takes. And I would ask, like, are the people you're talking to actually organized? Are they consuming media, or are they doing politics? Because those are two different things. If we're just consuming media, yeah, it's hard to be fully assured of really anything. And that's where like Jimmy Dore is like, it's going to go crazy. Because yes, this is like the house, this is stacked. The game's rigged toward the house, and they win most of the time. So if you want to bet on things not going properly, yes, you win a lot more of those bets.
100%. 100%. I think that's a great point, Matt. All right. This, for people, they might not know the deep lore of this, but Matt, did you see about this Liver King thing?
I did see that he was making terroristic threats to Joe Rogan.
He got arrested. You know who actually predicted it, by the way, or announced it before it happened, was fucking Alex Jones. Alex Jones, before, not even that he just got the news first, he said, I think that they're going to arrest him. I think that he's going to be arrested tonight. So, which means that there might be somebody like in a position of authority who is leaking shit to Alex Jones, which is kind of worrying.
Alex Jones law enforcement connections? Who would have thought of that?
So I think this bit is kind of related to that. So we'll just say this. Hey, David, I know you can't control when Texas Dangerous comes out, but Bernie understood politics is about persuasion, not violence. Just because you were the best broadcaster in Texas doesn't mean you should try killing rival podcasters and eating their livers. I wouldn't I wouldn't usually say this, but maybe you can ask Matt for some moral guidance on putting Texas Dangerous back in the bottle. Nobody knows more about hiding a dark, twisted soul than he does. Please tell my little buddy we're praying for him.
You know, it's a sweet thing. Yeah. I'll tell you this later. Thanks, Mark. It's always good hearing from you, our good friend. Our good friend David from Jamaica says, there'll be a war, but after the Supreme Court ruling, then the big, beautiful bill passing, I'm not confident that there will be elections in the future. How does left fight back when cops military, which are right wing? I don't see mechanisms. The ending of birthright citizenships tends to open the door for denaturalization. I think we're in a very dangerous time. I also think that we're still going to have elections in
Right.
November.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, people need to be prepared and engaged in building our power in any, across the board, obviously. But I don't think we're there yet. That doesn't mean I don't think that this stuff is very worrying. The denaturalization stuff, I do think, is very frightening. And if that stuff does begin in earnest, I mean, it will be very, very difficult to clean up that mess.
Yeah, there's already. I mean, there's people being disappeared in L.A. and by who knows what kind of forces. I don't think the preparations are being made to fully suspend democracy. I'll repeat, like, the only way I can see elections actually being foreclosed upon is if we end up with like a hot war with China or Russia or something like that. I think it would require something like that. Just domestic unrest. I frankly don't see that.
Yeah. Kowalski from Nebraska says the Islamophobic remarks leveled against Mamdani kind of fell flat when they're like, he's going to institute Sharia law. And it's like, okay, how does that compare to the laws of Alabama forced upon the city of New York, where a child that is the victim of rape from their own father would be forced by the state to carry that child to term? Or how about the Arkansas child labor laws, where children are being marched into the meatpacking facilities because they don't have SNAP? Out of curiosity, in the large cities, do you guys discuss the seemingly authoritarian religious hold on smaller states and rural areas?
I mean, not that much. I admit to, like, when I go home and see all of the anti-abortion like billboards and stuff, I'm like, this is a little bit different than New York City.
Well, one thing to remember though is a little bit of a cheaper media market.
That's true.
And I don't mean that to be too super cruel, but like there is an aspect of the billboards, especially because they always get talked about. We know like abortion politics in this country. I'm not trying to be naive about it, but there's a reason that you see those in certain places, and it's not just because of people's political beliefs. It's because it's like, hey, you're going to give me money to put something on a billboard. All right, yes, please.
Right.
Yeah, I 100%. I mean, it's the war on our freedom in this country is truly worrying, and what's really frightening about it is like there's always been attempts by the rich and powerful to restrict their freedoms. I mean, hell. I've been writing about the Brotherhood of the Timber Workers, which was like one of the first like interracial unions in the country, and back then, the black and whites congregating and socializing together was explicitly illegal in many states in the South, right? So there's always been plenty of attempts to kind of control people's activities. What is frightening is the combination of that with surveillance. And what they are trying to do. I mean, like, here in Texas, when it comes to the abortion stuff, they're trying to keep up on what people are buying, so that they can try to charge and build a case up on somebody if they travel, which is a constitutionally protected right, by the way. You have the right to travel across the country as an American citizen. You can't be, unless you've had to surrender your rights to the states because, you've been arrested. We do have the freedom of movement. The attempts to sort of say like, oh, if you travel to another state to get an abortion, the surveillance that the state is trying to use to build those cases is really, really frightening. Cisco says, to Joe's question, make sure our position. Okay, so I guess y'all. All right, I don't want to litigate fights between folks. I don't think they're doing. There's a statement from Rhode Island DSA that sounds like they are against, or they think there's limits to the Zohran thing. I will just say, people can check that out. I've sort of responded to what my thoughts are on it. I appreciate you giving us the extra context, but.
Yeah, I guess I just don't find that controversial or interesting. Getting a hold of New York City, the police alone, going to be a difficult task for Mayor Mamdani. Sure.
Yeah. Have you read? I haven't read those statements, so I don't know.
Oh no, I haven't. I'm talking just generally to the point. I'm pretty uninterested in.
Jay Nova says, unimportant question. I think this is actually an important question. Do y'all know anyone who went to the Zohran parties on primary night? I tried to get my friends, New York City friends, to go, but it was a weeknight. So, also, what is the merch vibe for Zohran like in New York City? I know he doesn't sell it, but he gives it out, so it's like everywhere, or no? I don't know about the merch. I know that they are giving out, which is a great idea, by the way. But, the thing with Zohran too is like it's nice to have campaign funding like that. I mean, they just they got the funding so quickly, and it's been great to see how they've been using it. I think getting merch out to people is a wonderful thing to do. The parties look like fun. I mean, I know folks who went, friends of mine in New York. I don't know if you have any notes on the people having fun on primary night. You should go and party on a Tuesday night when you win a historic election, I'll say. Who cares? You can go to work hungover. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I did not. I think I did get an invite to one of the parties and didn't make it.
I can't. Matt got invited to something and he didn't go.
What a surprise!
Yeah, is the sun gonna rise in the west and set in the east? Man. All right, I think that's it. Let me see. And I will say to our friend at Cisco, I appreciate your perspective on all of this, but I just think that we've sort of gone over everything enough that I think there's nothing more for Matt and I to say other than what we think about it.
I don't want to be. I don't want to be dismissive.
Whatever debates y'all are having though, like y'all need to. That's between y'all. I don't want to get involved in everyone's fights.
That's sort of it. Like I kind of think like I stay very aloof to inter-DSA drama to the point where I don't even know what the caucuses mean, and that's the way I like it because when I start getting asked to adjudicate those sorts of things, then I get a little bit annoyed at it. To be honest, I like taking down Andrew fucking Cuomo in a mayoral primary.
That's a great thing.
On saying Israel has a right to exist as a equal state with equal rights, and we should do free buses and health care, child care for folks. So I like that. Generally.
There is so much to talk about when it comes to the Zohran election and why it was such a great victory. I think one thing that I can't believe we've actually neglected to really get into, amazing in probably the race where being a pro-human rights, pro-Palestinian life might actually harm you. The fact that Zohran was able to not only win outright on election night, which everybody was saying was going to take weeks for this to get figured out, and then to have it turn out that not only did he win on election night when they did the actual secondary ballots on the ranked choice voting, he just won outright, even if everybody else had just ranked Cuomo all the way across the board. I mean, this is a big moment, not just because a radical and a socialist was elected, but somebody like this was able to take on that force in American politics, right? Truly an incredible moment.
At exactly the moment where everyone in media and is in the status quo is acting like there's some great mystery of how to confront this sort of shit, this trajectory this country's on, as if it's unclear. And no, it's just suppressed. It's been there with Bernie. It was there, in embers with Occupy. There's a clear issue here that needs to be spoken to by our politics, and it's just getting, in my opinion, more and more coherent as we march along.
100%. Well, friends, this was a special extended episode, a open post-game, summer post-game. This is going to be it. We're going to put that wall up. No more freeloading. Join us at patreon.com/leftreckoning. We do support the extra friends tonight. It's always wonderful to hang out with all of y'all, but we do especially appreciate our patrons who allow us to do it. And we love hearing from you. We love hearing your questions. We like hearing your disagreements as long as they're nice. You can pick up merch at leftreckoning.com/store. Next time you're out canvassing for Zohran against Mayor Adams, rock our country club member hat. And as we're building up our own movement across the country, it's really great to have all of y'all as a part of this. So a lot of really exciting things, actually. I'm not going to announce anything now, but some huge things happening in the LR universe in the next couple months. So sign up, join up, and keep in touch.
Peace.
All right, see you, friends.